Get out! You don't live here anymore." Those were the first words my own daughter screamed at me as I stood on the porch of the home I had owned for 35 years, my hospital bracelet still fastened around my wrist. Behind her stood a young couple I'd never seen before, clutching a set of keys that used to be mine. I could feel my heart struggling against my ribs, the same heart that had nearly given out just weeks earlier. But the pain in my chest now wasn't from my surgery. It was from betrayal so deep I couldn't breathe. The walkway leading to my front door was lined with the rose bushes I'd planted when my husband Michael was still alive. He'd helped me dig each hole, carefully measuring the distance between them, promising they would bloom for decades. Now those same roses were in full bloom, their sweet scent mixing with the fresh spring air as my world collapsed around me. I stood there, clutching my small suitcase of hospital belongings, wearing clothes my nurse had helped me put on that morning. "Mom, I told you on the phone," Jessica said, her voice dropping lower but the edge still there. She stepped outside, closing the door behind her so the strangers inside couldn't hear. "You're going to live with Aunt Patricia now. Remember? We discussed this while you were recovering, but we hadn't discussed anything. There had been no phone calls, no discussions, no agreements. The last conversation I'd had with my daughter was when she visited me in the hospital 3 weeks ago, promising to water my plants and collect my mail until I came home. Home to the house I had paid off 15 years ago. Home to the only place that still held memories of her father. Jessica, this is my house," I whispered, my voice still hoarse from the breathing tube. "I don't understand what's happening." Her face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. My Jessica, with her father's eyes and my stubborn chin, looked at me like I was a stranger, or worse, an inconvenience. "Mom, you signed the power of attorney after your first heart attack, remember? The doctor said you might not make it through this surgery, and we had to make decisions. You can't live alone anymore. It's not safe." I clutched the porch railing as the world tilted beneath me. Yes, I'd signed a power of attorney 5 years ago, after a mild heart attack had scared us both. But it was for emergencies, for medical decisions if I was unconscious. Not for this. Never for this. "You sold my house?" The words felt foreign in my mouth. Impossible. Jessica glanced over her shoulder at the couple now visible through the window. They were measuring something in what used to be my living room, where Michael's recliner had sat in the corner, where we'd opened Christmas presents, where I'd rocked my grandchildren. "It was the right decision, Mom. The money is in a trust for your care. Patricia has the guest room all set up for you." She reached for my suitcase. "Come on. My car's right here. I'll drive you there." I didn't move. Couldn't move. My things, my photos, Michael's things. "We saved everything important," she said quickly. Too quickly. "The rest was donated. You always talked about downsizing anyway. Donated. My life, packed up and given away without my knowledge. The quilt my grandmother had made, the collection of books Michael and I had read together over our 40 years of marriage, the china we'd received as wedding gifts, all gone." A young woman appeared at the door behind Jessica. She had kind eyes and looked uncomfortable. "Is everything okay? We can come back later if this isn't a good time." No, it's fine," Jessica said, her voice suddenly cheerful. "My mother just got out of the hospital and is a little confused. She's going to be living with her sister now." Confused? I wasn't confused. I was being erased. The young woman looked at me sympathetically. "The house is beautiful, ma'am. We'll take good care of it, I promise." I stared at her, this stranger who now owned the walls that had witnessed my life. How could I explain that the small chip in the kitchen counter happened when my son threw a toy car when he was 4? That the height marks penciled on the doorframe of the pantry tracked my grandchildren's growth? That the uneven floorboard in the hallway creaked every time Michael would sneak in late from work, trying not to wake me? "Mom." Jessica's voice was firmer now, her hand gripping my elbow. "Let's go. Patricia is waiting." As she led me to her car, I looked back at my home one last time. Through the window, I could see the young couple already moving through the rooms, planning and dreaming. They'd never know that the afternoon sun made patterns on the living room wall that Michael used to say looked like dancing angels. They wouldn't know that the best spot to read was the window seat in the den, where the light was perfect until sunset. Jessica helped me into her car, buckling my seatbelt like I was a child. The hospital discharge papers crinkled in my pocket, papers that said I was well enough to return home. But my home wasn't mine anymore. As we pulled away from the curb, I watched my house disappear in the side view mirror. The home where I'd nursed both my children through chickenpox and broken hearts, where I'd mourned my husband, where I'd planned to live out my remaining years surrounded by memories. "It's for the best, Mom," Jessica said, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "You'll see." But all I could see was betrayal in the rearview mirror, growing smaller as we drove away. My name is Eleanor Mitchell, though most people in Riverside, Connecticut call me Ellie. For 68 years, I've lived a quiet, careful life, the kind that doesn't make headlines or turn heads at the grocery store. I taught second grade at Riverside Elementary for 37 years before retiring. Every child who passed through my classroom got the same speech on their first day. "In this room, we are family." And I meant it. I still get Christmas cards from students who now have grandchildren of their own. Michael and I bought our house on Maple Street a year after we married. It was too big and too expensive, but Michael had pointed to the oak tree in the backyard and said, "Our kids will climb that someday." And they did. Jessica and her younger brother David. The house with the blue shutters became the gathering place for neighborhood children, for family holidays, for life's big and small moments. After Michael died from cancer 8 years ago, people expected me to sell the house and move into something smaller, more manageable. But the thought of leaving the place where Michael's laughter still seemed to echo in the hallways was unimaginable. So I stayed, learning to fix leaky faucets and program the thermostat myself. I planted a vegetable garden in the backyard and joined a widow's walking group on Tuesday mornings. I was building a new kind of life in the same loved space. My daily routine was simple, but fulfilling. Up at 6 each morning, coffee on the porch watching the birds at the feeder Michael had built. Water the garden, check in with my sister Patricia by phone, volunteer at the library on Mondays and Thursdays. On Sundays, I'd have dinner with Jessica's family, her husband Robert and their 2 children, Emma and Tyler, now teenagers with schedules too busy for regular visits with Grandma. David lives in Seattle with his wife, flying home only for Christmas and the occasional summer visit. My life wasn't exciting, but it was mine. Every inch of that house contained memories that kept me company. The kitchen where I'd taught Jessica to make Michael's favorite apple pie. The staircase where David had tumbled and knocked out his front tooth at age 7. The living room where we'd gathered around the piano at holidays. Michael's off-key baritone always louder than everyone else's. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday in April. I was in the garden, planting tomato seedlings, when the pain hit, like an elephant sitting on my chest. I managed to reach my phone in my pocket and dial 911 before collapsing among the half-planted vegetables. I woke up in the cardiac unit at Riverside General, a doctor explaining that I'd had a severe heart attack and would need bypass surgery. Jessica arrived at the hospital looking harried and important in her business suit, having come directly from her real estate office. She asked rapid-fire questions about my prognosis while simultaneously answering emails on her phone. David called from Seattle, his voice tight with worry but unable to get away because of an important project deadline. "Mom, you can't live alone anymore," Jessica declared on the second day, while I was still attached to monitors and IV tubes. "This is exactly what we've been worried about. What if you hadn't been able to reach your phone?" "I did reach it," I pointed out, but she wasn't listening. "We'll figure something out," she said, patting my hand. "Don't worry about anything. Just focus on getting better." The surgery was scheduled for the following week. The doctors explained the risks. At my age, with my heart condition, there were many, but also the necessity. I wasn't ready to leave this world yet. I had gardens to tend, books to read, grandchildren's graduations to attend. Patricia came to visit the day before my surgery, bringing my favorite nightgown from home and a stack of mystery novels. Unlike Jessica with her sleek bob and designer clothes, Patricia is soft around the edges, her silver hair always escaping its clip, her clothes chosen for comfort rather than style. 5 years younger than me, she's been a widow even longer, losing her Henry to a stroke 15 years ago. "Jess says you might come stay with me after the hospital," she said, arranging the nightgown in the drawer beside my bed. "Just for a few days," I assured her. "Until I'm steady on my feet again." Patricia gave me a look I couldn't quite interpret. "Whatever you need, Ellie. You know my door is always open." When the nurses came to prep me for surgery the next morning, Jessica arrived with a stack of papers. "Just some things to sign, Mom," she said, flipping through pages and pointing to signature lines. "Medical authorizations, insurance forms, all standard procedure." I signed where she indicated, my hand shaky from the pre-surgery medication they'd given me. Looking back now, I should have read every word. I should have asked questions, but I trusted my daughter. Why wouldn't I? She was my Jessica, the little girl who'd once made me a get-well card when I had a cold, decorating it with glitter and heart stickers. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia took effect was the surgical nurse asking if I had any questions. Just one, I'd said sleepily. Will I be home for the garden club meeting next month? I'm supposed to bring my blue ribbon hydrangeas. She'd smiled kindly. Let's focus on getting you through today, Mrs. Mitchell. I didn't know then that I would never bring my hydrangeas to another garden club meeting. I didn't know that while I fought for my life on an operating table, my daughter was already making calls about listing my house. I didn't know that the home I'd expected to return to, the home I'd fought to survive for, was already slipping through my fingers like sand. The surgery was successful, but complicated by an infection that kept me hospitalized for 3 weeks. During that time, I had few visitors. Jessica came sporadically, always in a rush, always with an explanation about why she couldn't stay long. Patricia came more often, bringing homemade soup that the nurses heated up for me, sitting beside my bed reading aloud from mystery novels when I was too tired to hold the books myself. Have you heard from Jessica? I asked Patricia one afternoon, as she helped me shuffle down the hospital corridor for my prescribed exercise. She's busy with work, Patricia said vaguely. And the kids, you know how it is. But there was something in her voice, something she wasn't saying. I was too weak, too focused on the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other, to press her further. When the doctor finally declared me ready for discharge, I felt a surge of energy at the thought of going home. Home to my garden, probably overgrown with weeds by now. Home to my comfortable chair by the window. Home to the familiar creaks and sighs of the house that had sheltered me through joy and grief. Your daughter will be here soon to pick you up, the nurse told me that morning, helping me dress in the clothes Patricia had brought. Clothes I'd left at my sister's house years ago after a weekend visit. Not the outfit I would have chosen to wear home. I sat on the edge of the hospital bed, my small suitcase packed with toiletries and the nightgown Patricia had brought, waiting for Jessica. When she finally arrived, her expression was a mixture of determination and something that looked almost like guilt. Ready to go, Mom? She asked, not quite meeting my eyes. More than ready, I said, standing carefully. I've missed my house so much. I bet the garden is a disaster. Jessica didn't respond, just took my arm and guided me toward the elevator. It wasn't until we were in her car, pulling out of the hospital parking lot, that she cleared her throat. Mom, I need to tell you something, she said, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. There's been a change of plans, and that's when she told me. Not that we were taking a detour, not that I would be staying with Patricia for a few days of additional recovery. No, she told me that my house, my home, was gone, sold to a young couple who had already moved in. My belongings dispersed, my life packed away without my knowledge or consent. In the weeks I'd spent fighting for my life in the hospital, my daughter had erased 68 years of living, and she'd done it, she insisted, for my own good. Patricia's condominium was in a senior living community 15 miles from my house in Riverside. Unlike my rambling home with its creaky stairs and sun-dappled garden, Patricia's place was all beige carpet and central air conditioning. The guest room she'd prepared for me had a hospital bed installed. A rental, she explained awkwardly, that Jessica had arranged. It's just temporary, Patricia assured me, as she helped me settle in, until you're stronger. But the closet held only the clothes Jessica had deemed appropriate to save. A few practical outfits, none of the colorful scarves Michael had bought me over the years, none of my favorite sweaters. On the bedside table sat a single photo frame holding a family portrait taken at Jessica's wedding 12 years ago. One photo to represent my entire life. Where are my things? I asked Patricia, once Jessica had left with a rushed excuse about needing to pick up Tyler from baseball practice. My books, my photo albums. Patricia wouldn't meet my eyes. Jessica said she put the important things in storage. The rest? She trailed off. The rest she got rid of, I finished flatly. Patricia sat beside me on the edge of the hospital bed. Ellie, I'm so sorry. She told me you'd agreed to this, that after your heart attack you'd decided the house was too much to handle. And you believed her? My voice cracked with the hurt of this secondary betrayal. Patricia, my sister, my confidant, had accepted Jessica's version without question. She had the power of attorney paperwork, Patricia said helplessly, and she was so certain, so convincing. She said the doctors weren't optimistic about your recovery, that difficult decisions had to be made quickly. I closed my eyes, trying to control my breathing the way the cardiac rehabilitation nurse had taught me. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Don't let your heart rate spike. Don't undo the surgeon's careful work. I need to see those papers, I said finally. The ones I signed. Patricia nodded. I'll ask her to bring them next time she visits. But Jessica didn't visit the next day, or the day after. When I called her cell phone, it went straight to voicemail. When I called her house, Robert answered with awkward explanations about Jessica being in meetings or taking the kids to activities. On the third day, I used Patricia's computer to check my bank account, something that had never occurred to me to do from the hospital. The balance was nearly zero. My substantial savings, money I'd carefully set aside from my teacher's pension and Michael's life insurance, was gone. All that remained was the monthly deposit of my Social Security check, due to arrive the following week. She's stolen everything, I whispered, staring at the screen in disbelief. Patricia, reading over my shoulder, gasped. There must be some mistake. Jessica wouldn't what? I interrupted. Wouldn't sell my house without my permission. Wouldn't dispose of my belongings like garbage. Wouldn't lie to my face about it all. My hands were shaking on the keyboard. Call her. Now. Tell her I want answers. Patricia made the call, her voice trembling as she relayed my demand. She put the phone on speaker so I could hear. Mom needs to calm down, Jessica said coolly. Her blood pressure can't handle this kind of stress. Tell her the money is in a trust for her care. She'll get a monthly allowance, and the rest is being managed to make sure she's taken care of for however long I have left. I finished, loud enough for her to hear. Is that what you were going to say? However long before I die and you get whatever's left. There was a pause on the line. Mom, you're being dramatic. This is exactly why these arrangements needed to be made. You're not thinking clearly. The surgery, the medications. Stop it, I said, my voice deadly quiet. Stop pretending this is about my health. This is about money, my house. Fine, Jessica snapped, her composure cracking. You want the truth? That house was sitting there, in the hottest real estate market Riverside has seen in decades, while you rattled around in it alone. Do you know what we could have gotten for it 5 years ago when I first suggested selling? Less than half what we got now. That money needs to be managed properly, not frittered away on property taxes and maintenance for a house that's too big for one person. We? I repeated. We didn't get anything for my house. I owned that house. Me, not you. And now that money is secure in a trust that will pay for your care, for however long, she stopped herself this time, for the rest of your life, which, if you'd listened to your doctors instead of fighting every recommendation, could be many more years. I want to see the paperwork, I insisted. All of it. The power of attorney, the house sale, the trust documents, everything. I'll have copies made, she said dismissively. But not if you're going to work yourself into another heart attack over this. It's done, Mom. The house is sold. The trust is established. You need to accept it and focus on your recovery. After she hung up, I sat in silence, Patricia hovering anxiously beside me. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I couldn't process it all. My own daughter had waited until I was at my most vulnerable, sedated, scared, literally fighting for my life, to take everything from me. I need to lie down, I told Patricia, suddenly exhausted. In the guest room, my room now, apparently, I lay on the unfamiliar hospital bed and stared at the ceiling. The pain in my chest wasn't from my healing incision, but from something much deeper. Jessica, my firstborn, who I'd nursed through colicky nights, who I'd taught to read, whose skinned knees I'd bandaged and whose broken hearts I'd soothed. When had she become someone who could do this to me? When had I become nothing more than an inconvenient old woman to her, a problem to be managed? I thought of Robert, Jessica's husband, who always seemed uncomfortable around me, checking his watch during Sunday dinners. Had he encouraged this betrayal? Or my grandchildren, Emma and Tyler? Had they asked about me during those 3 weeks in the hospital? Did they know what their mother had done? My thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Patricia entered carrying a cup of tea and a small white pill. Your heart medication, she explained, setting both on the nightstand. Jessica brought over your prescriptions yesterday. I took the pill silently, washing it down with the tea. Patricia sat on the edge of the bed, her kind face creased with worry. Ellie, I don't know what to say. I never thought Jessica would do something like this. She's always been so responsible. Responsible, I echoed hollowly. Yes, that's Jessica. Always the responsible one. David was the dreamer, but Jessica was the one who made lists and plans. I used to be so proud of her efficiency. I laughed bitterly. She certainly disposed of me efficiently, didn't she? Don't talk like that, Patricia said, squeezing my hand. You're not disposed of. You're here with me. We'll figure this out. But what was there to figure out? My house was gone. My savings were locked away in a trust I couldn't access. My belongings had been scattered to the winds. At 68 years old, after a lifetime of careful planning and saving, I was essentially homeless, dependent on my sister's charity and my daughter's controlled allowances. Did she bring any of my photo albums? I asked suddenly, thinking of the carefully preserved memories that had lined my bookshelf at home. The one with Michael's and my wedding photos? The baby books? Patricia's hesitation told me everything I needed to know. She said there wasn't room here for all that, Patricia admitted finally. She took some to her house and put the rest in storage. Storage where? I'm not sure. A facility somewhere. She said she'd sort through them when she had time. When she had time. My life, reduced to something my daughter would deal with when her busy schedule allowed. That night I couldn't sleep. The hospital bed, designed for utility rather than comfort, creaked with every movement. Through the thin walls, I could hear Patricia's television playing late-night reruns. I was a guest in my sister's home, with nothing of my own, but the clothes Jessica had deemed practical enough to keep. I thought of my garden, now belonging to that young couple. Were they tending the roses? Would they appreciate the heirloom tomatoes I'd planted just before my heart attack? Or would they rip everything out to put in a swimming pool or a play structure for future children? When dawn finally came, I made a decision. I wouldn't rage against what had been done to me. I wouldn't beg Jessica to reconsider or plead for my possessions back. No, I would be strategic. I would be patient. And I would find out exactly what my daughter had done and what legal recourse I might have to undo it. But first, I had to get stronger. I had to heal, because the fight ahead would require all my strength, and I couldn't afford another setback. Jessica thought she had won, thought she had neatly solved the problem of her aging mother, but she had forgotten something important about me. I had taught second grade for 37 years. I knew how to handle children who thought they were being clever, and I knew that sometimes the quietest person in the room was the one you needed to watch most carefully. I met Michael Mitchell during my junior year at the University of Connecticut. It was 1974, and I was studying to become a teacher, determined to make a difference in children's lives the way my own third-grade teacher had done for me. Michael was in engineering, tall and serious with glasses that kept sliding down his nose when he was concentrating. We met in the library, reaching for the same book on a high shelf. He got it for me, and then asked if he could buy me a coffee when I was finished with my studies. That coffee turned into dinner, which turned into 40 years of marriage, 2 children, and a life built on small kindnesses and quiet devotion. Michael wasn't a man of grand gestures. He never surprised me with extravagant jewelry or trips to Paris. Instead, he showed his love by warming up the car on cold mornings before I left for school, by remembering to record my favorite shows when I had late parent-teacher conferences, by bringing me tea in bed every Sunday morning of our married life. When Jessica was born in 1978, Michael held her with engineer's hands that suddenly seemed too large, too clumsy for this tiny, perfect human. "She has your eyes," he'd whispered. Though at 2 days old, all babies have unfocused, navy blue eyes. I'd smiled, exhausted and elated. "And your serious expression," I'd countered, as Jessica's tiny brow furrowed in concentration. David followed 3 years later, a surprise when we'd begun to think our family was complete with just 1 child. Where Jessica was serious and determined from her first breath, David was sunny and easygoing, taking after Michael with his lanky frame and nearsighted eyes, but inheriting my love of stories and art. Our house on Maple Street grew along with our family. Michael built bookshelves that covered an entire wall of the living room, filling them with engineering manuals, my collection of children's literature, and later, the books our own children loved. He constructed a treehouse in the backyard oak, spending an entire summer getting the design just right. When Jessica turned 13 and declared the treehouse for babies, Michael simply nodded and converted it into a reading nook where she could escape with her journals and teen magazines. We weren't wealthy, A teacher and an engineer working for the city's water management department didn't bring home extravagant salaries. But we were careful with money, saving for college funds before indulging in luxuries, teaching our children the value of patience and delayed gratification. Jessica absorbed these lessons perhaps too well, becoming almost rigid about money even as a child, carefully recording her allowance in a small notebook, saving for big purchases while David spent his on comic books and candy within hours of receiving it. "She gets that from your mother," Michael would tease, referring to my practical Depression-era mother who saved string and reused wrapping paper. But there was truth in it. Jessica watched every penny, worked through high school to save for college despite our assurances that we had her tuition covered, and graduated with a business degree and a 5-year plan for success. David was different, more like Michael's brother James, an artist who lived in a converted warehouse in New York, perpetually broke, but perpetually happy. David studied graphic design, took a year off to backpack through Europe, and eventually settled in Seattle working for a tech company where he could be creative but still pay his bills. He married Lisa, a kindergarten teacher with multicolored hair and a laugh that filled every corner of a room. Jessica married Robert Turner, an accountant with ambitions to open his own firm. They had a lavish wedding that Jessica had saved for herself, refusing our offers to contribute more than a token amount. "You've done enough, Mom," she'd said, showing me spreadsheets detailing every expense. "Robert and I want to do this ourselves." I'd felt a twinge of hurt. Didn't she understand that giving to your children is one of life's great joys? But Michael had squeezed my hand. "Let her do it her way," he'd advised. "It's important to her to be independent." When Emma was born, and then Tyler 2 years later, I watched Jessica approach motherhood with the same efficiency she applied to everything else. Schedules were posted on the refrigerator, developmental milestones were tracked in a special app, and Jessica was back at work, exactly 12 weeks after each birth, having arranged precise childcare schedules that involved a nanny, Robert's mother 2 days a week, and me filling in the gaps. I loved being a grandmother, finding in it a relaxed joy that was different from the more anxious experience of raising my own children. I taught Emma to make Michael's favorite cookies, letting her measure ingredients imprecisely and lick the spoon despite Jessica's rules about raw eggs and proper baking techniques. I took Tyler fishing in the small pond in the park near our house, something Jessica deemed a waste of time, but that brought out a patience in her active son that she'd never witnessed. When Michael was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in 2015, the prognosis was grim from the start. 6 months, maybe less, the doctor said. He made it 8, fighting through painful treatments not because he thought they would save him, but because he wasn't ready to leave me, wasn't ready to miss seeing his grandchildren grow up. I became his caretaker, learning to administer medications, change dressings, help him to the bathroom when his strength failed. Jessica hired a nurse to come in 3 times a week, insisting I couldn't do it all myself, but I sent the young woman home the first day. "This isn't a burden," I'd told Jessica. "This is what in sickness and in health means." The night Michael died, Jessica and David were both there. We'd moved his hospital bed into our living room so he could see the garden through the big windows. David sat on one side of the bed, sketching his father's hands, those capable, gentle hands that had built so much. Jessica sat on the other side, telling Michael about Tyler's recent baseball game in a forced, cheerful voice. I held his hand, feeling the wedding ring loose on his finger as his body wasted away. Michael waited until both children stepped out, David to make tea, Jessica to take a work call she insisted couldn't wait, before he squeezed my hand weakly. "Ellie," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Promise me you'll live, really live, not just exist." I promised, tears streaming down my face, and 10 minutes later, with my head resting on his chest, Michael Mitchell took his last breath. The house felt cavernous without him. Jessica immediately suggested I sell it, move into a retirement community or a smaller condo. "It's too much for you to maintain alone," she argued, "and the money would secure your future." But I couldn't leave. Not yet. Every corner held memories of Michael, of our children growing up, of the life we'd built together. I needed time to say goodbye to him properly before I could consider saying goodbye to our home. So I stayed, and I learned. I learned how to program the thermostat Michael had always handled, how to restart the furnace when it acted up in winter, how to use the power tools in Michael's workshop to make minor repairs. When the roof needed replacing the year after Michael died, I got 3 estimates, researched shingle types, and supervised the work myself, much to Jessica's dismay. "You're going to get scammed, Mom," she warned. "These contractors see a widow and dollar signs light up in their eyes." But I wasn't scammed. I was thorough, meticulous, just as Michael had taught me to be over our years together. The new roof was installed properly, under budget, with a warranty that would outlast my time in the house. I found new rhythms, new routines. I joined a widows' support group that met at the local community center, finding solidarity with women navigating the same lonely territory. I volunteered at the library, reading to children during story hour, finding comfort in their uncomplicated enthusiasm for tales of adventure and magic. I took a watercolor class at the senior center, discovering a modest talent that Michael would have encouraged with his usual quiet support. And I spent time with my grandchildren, whenever Jessica's busy schedule allowed. I taught Emma to garden, showing her how to coax reluctant seeds into life. I attended every one of Tyler's baseball games, sitting in the bleachers with a thermos of hot chocolate in fall and spring, a cooler of iced tea in summer. I saw in them echoes of Michael. Tyler had his grandfather's careful way of thinking through problems, while Emma had inherited his dry sense of humor that revealed itself in unexpected moments. Jessica watched my independent life with a mixture of approval and concern. She was glad I was keeping busy, as she put it, but worried about everything from my driving to my decision to travel alone to David's home in Seattle for Christmas, the year after Michael died. "Mom, you're not 30 anymore," she'd say, in a tone that reminded me of how I used to speak to my own mother in her later years. "You need to be realistic about your limitations." But I didn't feel limited. Not really. Yes, my knees protested when I knelt too long in the garden. Yes, I needed reading glasses for fine print and went to bed earlier than I used to. But I was healthy, active, engaged with life. I'd kept my promise to Michael. When the first heart attack hit 5 years after Michael's death, it came without warning. One moment I was reaching for a book on a high shelf in the library where I volunteered. The next I was on the floor, a crushing weight on my chest, the concerned faces of patrons and staff swimming above me as I gasped for breath. It was a mild attack, the doctor said afterward. Minimal damage to the heart muscle. With medication, a healthier diet, and cardiac rehabilitation exercises, I could expect to fully recover. Jessica and David both flew into crisis mode, with David flying in from Seattle and Jessica showing up at the hospital with a 3-ring binder full of information on cardiac care and recovery protocols. "You need to sign this," she said on my second day in the hospital, placing a document on the rolling tray table over my bed. "It's a power of attorney, just in case there's another emergency, and decisions need to be made quickly." I skimmed the document, noting the broad powers it granted. Medical decisions, financial management, even the right to sell property if deemed necessary for my care. "This seems extreme for a mild heart attack," I observed. Jessica's expression was a mixture of exasperation and concern. "Mom, you were lucky this time. What if you'd been alone at home instead of at the library with people around? What if the next one is more severe? David and I need to be able to make decisions if you can't." She had a point. I'd seen friends' families torn apart by disagreements over medical care when a parent became incapacitated, and I trusted my children. Why wouldn't I? They were smart, responsible adults who loved me. "Let me think about it," I said. Jessica left the document with me, and that night, I read it more carefully. The language was broad, giving my children, primarily Jessica, as the one who lived locally, extensive control over my life if I became unable to make my own decisions. But the key phrase was, "if I became unable." It wasn't a blanket permission to take over while I was still competent. I signed it the next day, with the hospital social worker as witness. Jessica made copies, keeping the original in the same fireproof box where she stored her own important documents. I didn't think about it again until 3 weeks ago, when I woke up in the hospital after my bypass surgery, to discover that Jessica had interpreted unable to make decisions in a way I never intended. Now, sitting in Patricia's guest room surrounded by beige walls instead of the blue ones Michael and I had painted together, I thought about the lifetime of careful decisions that had led me to this moment. The trust I'd placed in my daughter, the house that had sheltered decades of love and growth and grief, the garden my hands had tended for 35 years, all gone, with a few signatures on papers I never read carefully enough. Patricia knocked softly on the door, bringing in a tray with soup and a sandwich. "You should eat something," she said gently. "Keep up your strength." I looked at my sister's kind face, lined now with age and worry. Patricia, who had taken me in without question, who was now caught between loyalty to her sister and concern for her niece. "Thank you," I said, accepting the tray. "Not just for lunch, for everything." Patricia sat beside me on the bed. "Ellie, I've been thinking. There must be legal options. What Jessica did, it can't be right." "No," I agreed quietly. "It's not right. But whether it's legal is another question entirely." I took a spoonful of soup, buying time to organize my thoughts. "I need to see those papers, all of them. And then I need to talk to a lawyer." Patricia nodded, determination replacing the worry in her eyes. "I'll help you. Whatever you need." As she left me to eat my lunch, I felt a small flame of resolve burning in my chest, right alongside the healing surgical wound. Jessica thought she had neatly solved the problem of her aging mother, but she'd forgotten what Michael always said about me. "Still waters run deep, and your mother's an ocean." I might be down, but I wasn't out. Not yet. Not while I still had promises to keep. 2 days later, Jessica finally came to Patricia's condo, bringing a folder of papers and a forced smile. She'd brought Tyler with her. A buffer, I realized immediately, to prevent any emotional confrontation. My 16-year-old grandson hugged me awkwardly, his lanky frame having grown several inches since I'd last seen him. "Hey, Grandma," he said, genuine concern in his eyes. "You feeling better?" "Much better now that you're here," I told him, meaning it. Whatever Jessica had done, it wasn't Tyler's fault, and I wouldn't let it affect my relationship with my grandchildren. Jessica set the folder on Patricia's dining room table. "Here are the copies you wanted, Mom," she said briskly. "Though I don't see why you need to upset yourself with all the legal details. Everything's taken care of. Tyler, would you like some cookies?" Patricia intervened smoothly. "I baked chocolate chip this morning, and I could use some help testing them." Tyler glanced at his mother, who nodded permission, and followed Patricia into the kitchen, leaving Jessica and me alone. "Bringing Tyler was manipulative," I said quietly, once they were out of earshot. "Using my grandson as a shield." Jessica had the grace to flush slightly. "He wanted to see you. And yes, I thought having him here might help keep this conversation civil." "I'm always civil," I replied, opening the folder. "I taught elementary school for nearly 4 decades, Jessica. I know how to control my emotions, even when I'm dealing with childish behavior." Her mouth tightened, but she said nothing as I began to examine the papers. The first document was the power of attorney I'd signed 5 years earlier after my mild heart attack. Next came the papers I'd apparently signed the day before my bypass surgery. Authorization for Jessica to make medical decisions, as expected, but also documents giving her full control over my financial affairs, in the event of incapacity or at her discretion. At her discretion. 2 words that had given my daughter complete control over my life, whether I was incapacitated or not. "I never would have signed this," I said, looking up at her. "Not consciously." "You did sign it," Jessica countered. "Your signature is right there. When I was medicated, frightened, and about to undergo major surgery, you took advantage, Jessica. You waited until I was at my most vulnerable." She crossed her arms defensively. "I did what needed to be done. The doctors weren't sure you'd even survive the surgery, Mom. Decisions had to be made. Decisions about my medical care, yes. Not about selling my home out from under me before I was even out of the ICU." I continued looking through the papers, finding the trust documents next. Mitchell Family Trust, it was titled, with Jessica listed as trustee and myself as beneficiary. The house sale proceeds, minus a substantial trustee fee, had been placed in this trust, with disbursements to be made for my care and a modest monthly allowance for personal expenses. $10,000, I noted, looking at the trustee fee Jessica had awarded herself. "That's quite generous for managing your mother's money." "It's a standard fee for this kind of arrangement," she said stiffly. "I consulted with our family attorney. Everything is completely above board." Our family attorney, the same man who had handled Michael's will, who had advised us on our children's college funds, who had known our family for decades. Had he really approved this? Or had Jessica simply told him what she wanted, using her position as a successful real estate agent to steamroll any objections? I kept reading, finding the house sale documents last. The property had sold for far more than I would have guessed. The real estate market had indeed been hot, as Jessica had pointed out, but seeing the figure in black and white made the betrayal even more stark. My home, the center of my life for 35 years, reduced to a number on a page, a transaction completed without my knowledge while I lay unconscious, my chest cut open on an operating table. "And my belongings?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "There's nothing here about what happened to everything inside the house." Jessica shifted uncomfortably. "Most of it went to donation centers, Goodwill, the Salvation Army. The furniture was older, not really worth much. I kept the family photos and important papers, of course. They're in storage." "Storage where?" "A facility near my house. I'll get them to you eventually, but there's no room here in Patricia's guest room for all that stuff." Stuff. My life's collection of memories, dismissed as stuff. And my jewelry, Michael's watches, our wedding rings. Jessica reached into her handbag and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "I brought those today, actually. I knew you'd want them." She handed me the pouch, and I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were my engagement and wedding rings, the pearl earrings Michael had given me on our 10th anniversary, and his wedding band that I'd kept on a chain around my neck after he died. But Michael's watch was missing. The vintage Omega his father had given him when he graduated from college. The watch he'd worn every day of our married life. "Where's your father's watch?" I asked. Jessica's expression flickered. "I thought Robert might want it, as a keepsake." The room seemed to tilt around me. "You gave your father's watch to Robert? Without asking me?" "Dad would have wanted him to have it," Jessica said defensively. "Robert admired it for years." I closed the velvet pouch carefully, setting it aside before I gave in to the urge to throw it at my daughter's face. "Your father would have wanted his watch to go to his son, to David, or to Tyler when he's older." "Well, it's done now," Jessica said dismissively. "Robert's been wearing it for weeks." From the kitchen, I could hear Tyler laughing at something Patricia had said. The normal, everyday sound of family life continuing, while my world collapsed around me. "I want to see the rest of my things," I said. "The things in storage. I want to go through them myself." Jessica sighed. "Mom, you're still recovering. Moving boxes around isn't a good idea right now." I didn't say I'd move them. I said I want to see them, to know what's left of my life. She checked her watch. Not Michael's watch, now on her husband's wrist, but her own sleek, expensive timepiece. "I'll set something up. Maybe next week, when you're stronger." "Tomorrow," I countered. "I want to go tomorrow." Jessica's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with obvious relief. "That's Robert. He's picking up Emma from her friend's house and wants to know if we need anything from the store." She stood, gathering her handbag. "I'll text you about the storage unit, Mom, but not tomorrow. I have closing scheduled all day." Before I could protest, she called out, "Tyler, we need to go, honey." My grandson came back into the dining room, a half-eaten cookie in his hand. "Already? But we just got here. Dad needs us," Jessica said firmly, "and Grandma needs to rest." Tyler gave me another hug, this one less awkward than the first. "I'll come back soon, Grandma. Maybe you can help me with my history project. It's about the 1970s, and Mom said you were around then." "Despite everything," I laughed. "I was indeed around then, and I'd love to help with your project." Jessica hustled him toward the door with barely concealed impatience. "We'll set something up. Feel better, Mom." And then they were gone, leaving me alone with the folder of papers that documented the systematic dismantling of my independent life. Patricia came back into the dining room, her expression concerned. "That was quick. Too many uncomfortable truths," I said, gesturing to the papers spread across the table. "Jessica doesn't do well with those." Patricia sat beside me, picking up one of the documents. "What will you do?" "I'm going to fight," I said simply. "But first, I need to see what's left of my belongings." Jessica said they're in a storage unit near her house. "I'll drive you," Patricia offered immediately. "Tomorrow if you want." I shook my head. "She won't tell me where it is. Says she'll set something up next week when I'm stronger." I gathered the papers, my mind already working on the next step. But there might be another way to find out. The following morning, after Patricia left for her part-time job at the local library, I called Tyler's cell phone. It went to voicemail. He was in school, of course, but I left a careful message. "Tyler, it's Grandma. I was hoping you could help me with something. Call me when you get a chance. Love you." He called back during his lunch period, his voice lowered to avoid being caught using his phone during school hours. "Grandma? Everything okay?" "Everything's fine, sweetheart. I just need a small favor." Your mother mentioned she put some of my things in storage near your house, but I can't remember the name of the place or the unit number. Do you happen to know? Tyler was quiet for a moment. Yeah, it's that Storage King place on Elmwood Avenue. Mom has the key on her big key ring, the one with the red tag. I think it's Unit 217. I helped her move some boxes there last weekend. My heart clenched. Last weekend, when I was still in the hospital, fighting off a post-surgical infection, unaware that my home was already emptied, my life already packed away. Thank you, Tyler. That's very helpful. You need something from there? He asked. I could get it for you after school maybe if you tell me what it is. No, I assured him quickly. I just wanted to know where everything was, for my peace of mind. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of Patricia's guest bed, considering my options. Patricia wouldn't be home until 5. Jessica had said she had closings all day. If I could get to that storage unit, I could at least see what remained of my possessions, maybe retrieve some of the most precious items. But how? I couldn't drive yet. My doctor had said no driving for at least 4 weeks after the surgery. Patricia's condo was in a suburban area with limited public transportation. A taxi or an Uber would be expensive, especially for the round trip of nearly 30 miles to Jessica's neighborhood and back. And then I remembered Robert's mother, Margaret. She lived in the same retirement community as Patricia, just 3 buildings over. We weren't close. Margaret had always been distant, seeming to view me as competition for her grandchildren's affection. But she might help me if I framed it correctly. I found her number in Patricia's address book and made the call, rehearsing my story carefully. Margaret, it's Eleanor Mitchell, Jessica's mother. Eleanor, she replied, surprise evident in her voice. I heard you were staying with Patricia after your surgery. How are you feeling? Better every day, thank you. Margaret, I wonder if I might ask a favor. Jessica has been so helpful, putting some of my things in storage while I recover, but there are a few items I really need. Medications and some personal effects that were overlooked in the move. I wonder if you might be able to drive me to the storage facility. It would save Jessica having to make a special trip. There was a pause, and I could almost hear Margaret weighing her loyalty to her daughter-in-law against basic human decency. Well, I suppose I could, she said finally. When were you thinking? Today, if possible? It wouldn't take long. Just a quick trip to get what I need. Another pause. I have bridge club at 2, but I could take you this morning. Say, 11? That would be perfect, I said, relief washing over me. Thank you so much, Margaret. I wrote a note for Patricia explaining where I'd gone, in case she came home for lunch. Then I dressed carefully in one of the bland outfits Jessica had deemed appropriate to save from my wardrobe, taking extra time to style my hair and apply a touch of makeup. I wanted to look capable, not like a fragile old woman who needed her life managed for her. Margaret arrived precisely at 11, her silver Lexus purring into the parking space in front of Patricia's building. She eyed me critically as I made my way slowly down the walkway. Should you be out and about so soon after surgery? She asked, not offering to help as I eased myself into the passenger seat. The doctor encourages gentle activity, I replied, buckling my seatbelt. And getting a few of my own things will do wonders for my morale. Margaret nodded, pulling back onto the road. Jessica has been working so hard to get everything arranged for you. The house sold in just 3 days, you know, over asking price. So I heard, I said neutrally. Jessica has always been good at real estate. Robert says she's the top agent in her office this year, Margaret continued proudly, as if her son's wife's accomplishments somehow reflected well on her, even with taking time to handle your situation, my situation, as if my life was a problem to be solved. I appreciate everything she's done, I lied smoothly. This storage unit, for instance. Was she able to fit much of my furniture in there? Margaret shook her head. Oh no, most of that went to donation. The unit is just for personal items, photos and such. The things Jessica thought you might want eventually, when I was settled somewhere, when I had accepted my new, diminished life. The drive to Storage King took nearly 40 minutes, during which Margaret regaled me with stories about her bridge club and her recent cruise to Alaska. She didn't ask a single question about my health, my feelings about losing my home, or my plans for the future. In Margaret's world, I had been neatly categorized as elderly parent being properly managed, and that was that. The storage facility was a sprawling complex of identical orange buildings with roll-up doors. Margaret pulled up to the office, where a bored-looking young man gave us directions to Unit 217 after I explained that my daughter had rented it, but I needed to retrieve some items. "Do you have the key?" he asked. I manufactured a flustered expression. "Oh dear, I thought Jessica might have left a spare key here at the office. Under my name, perhaps?" He checked his computer. "No spare keys on file for that unit. But if you're on the rental agreement, I can let you in this once and you can arrange for a key later." I held my breath, but he didn't ask to see ID or check whether I was actually listed on the agreement. He simply grabbed a master key and led us to Building C, where Unit 217 was located. The metal door rolled up with a clatter, revealing a space about the size of a small bedroom, stacked with cardboard boxes and a few items of furniture that apparently had been deemed worthy of keeping. Michael's reading chair, my grandmother's rocking chair, the cedar chest that had held family quilts for generations. "I'll leave you to it," the young man said, handing Margaret a temporary access card. "Just come back to the office when you're done, and we'll reset the locks." Margaret checked her watch as soon as he left. "I have about 45 minutes before I need to leave for Bridge Club. Will that be enough time?" "More than enough," I assured her, already moving toward the nearest stack of boxes. "Thank you again for bringing me, Margaret." She nodded, settling into Michael's reading chair with her phone. "I'll just catch up on emails while you look." The boxes were labeled in Jessica's precise handwriting. Kitchen Misk, Mom's winter clothes, photo albums, childhood, books, keeper pile. I opened the photo album box first, finding the leather-bound volumes that chronicled our family's history. Michael and me on our wedding day, looking impossibly young, Jessica's first steps, David's high school graduation, the beach vacations, the Christmas mornings, the ordinary Sundays that made up a lifetime of love. In another box, I found the quilts my grandmother had made, including the wedding ring pattern she'd created as a gift when Michael and I married. In a third, I discovered some of my jewelry that hadn't made it into the velvet pouch Jessica had given me. Costume pieces, mostly, but among them, the garnet earrings David had saved up to buy me for Christmas when he was 14. What I didn't find were Michael's things, his collection of first edition engineering books, the model trains he'd lovingly assembled over decades, the journals he'd kept since college, documenting his thoughts and discoveries. It was as if Jessica had erased her father from our family history, saving only the items she deemed practical, or that took up minimal space. "Did you find what you needed?" Margaret asked after 30 minutes, clearly growing impatient. "Almost," I said, opening another box labeled Important Papers. Inside, I found folders containing our marriage certificate, Michael's death certificate, the deed to the house, now marked sold in Jessica's handwriting, and financial records going back decades. I also found our wills, Michael's, which had been executed after his death, and mine, still in effect. My hands trembled as I opened the folder containing my will. It was the document I'd created with our family attorney after Michael died, updating the provisions to reflect my new circumstances as a widow. I'd left the house to be divided equally between Jessica and David, with specific bequests of personal items and family heirlooms. Michael's train collection was to go to Tyler, who had shown an interest in engineering like his grandfather. My jewelry was divided between Emma and my nieces. The family photos and documents were to be shared. All of it now meaningless. The house was gone. Many of the specified heirlooms were apparently gone as well. My carefully considered legacy, dismantled by my daughter's efficiency. "Eleanor," Margaret said, standing up, "I really need to get going if I'm going to make it to Bridge Club on time." I closed the folder, slipping it into my purse when Margaret wasn't looking. Of course, I found most of what I needed. I picked up one of the photo albums as well, the one containing pictures of Michael and me in the early years of our marriage. Would it be all right if I took just this one album? For comfort while I recover? Margaret glanced at it and nodded. "I'm sure Jessica wouldn't mind. Did you find your medications?" "They weren't here after all," I improvised. "Jessica must have taken them to her house. But the photo album will be a great comfort." As we left the storage unit, the young man from the office appeared to lock up behind us. "Find everything okay?" "Yes, thank you," I said, clutching the album to my chest. "My daughter has been so helpful, organizing everything for me." He smiled sympathetically. "That's good. My mom downsized last year and it was tough on her, but she's happier now in her smaller place. Less to worry about, you know? Less to worry about." As if my home, filled with memories and meaning, had been nothing but a burden. Margaret drove me back to Patricia's condo in silence, clearly eager to be done with her good deed for the day. As I thanked her and carefully made my way up the walkway, photo album in hand, I heard her car pull away before I'd even reached the door. Inside, I sat at Patricia's dining room table and opened my purse, taking out the folder with my will. I needed to know exactly what legal ground I was standing on before I confronted Jessica, because confront her I would, armed with knowledge and righteous anger. But as I began to read through the document more carefully, a wave of dizziness washed over me. My chest felt tight, my left arm tingling with alarming numbness. I recognized the symptoms immediately, the same ones I'd experienced during my first heart attack. "Not now," I whispered, fumbling for the nitroglycerin pills I kept in my pocket. "Please, not now." I managed to get one under my tongue before the room began to spin. As I slipped from the chair to the floor, the last thing I saw was Michael's smiling face in the photo album that had fallen open beside me. Then darkness closed in, and I knew nothing more. I woke to the sound of beeping monitors and the antiseptic smell of hospital disinfectant. Patricia sat beside the bed, her face lined with worry. When she saw my eyes open, she squeezed my hand. "Ellie, thank God. You gave us such a fright. What happened?" My voice was a rasp, my throat sore as if I'd been intubated. "Minor heart attack," Patricia explained gently. "I came home for lunch and found you on the floor. The paramedics came right away." I closed my eyes, processing this new setback. How bad? Not as bad as it could have been. "The doctors say you'll recover fully, but..." She hesitated. "But what?" Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "Jessica has been named your medical guardian. The doctor agreed that you can't make decisions for yourself right now." The betrayal was so complete, so devastating that for a moment I couldn't breathe. My own daughter, using my moment of weakness to seize the last shreds of my independence. "No," I whispered. "She can't do that." "She already has," Patricia said, anguish in her voice. "She showed the doctor the power of attorney, explained about the house, about finding you at the storage unit when you should have been resting. The doctor agreed that you're a danger to yourself, a danger to myself, for wanting to see my own belongings, for fighting to maintain some control over my own life. Where is she?" I asked, my voice stronger now, fueled by a rage so pure it burned away the fog of medication and exhaustion. "Getting coffee, I think. She's been here all night. The doctors say you can probably go home, to my place tomorrow if your tests look good." Home. A word that no longer had any meaning for me. I turned my face to the wall, unwilling to let Patricia see the depth of my despair. It seemed Jessica had won. With this second heart attack, she had all the ammunition she needed to take complete control of my life. No lawyer would fight for the independence of an elderly woman with a serious heart condition who had collapsed while secretly visiting a storage unit against medical advice. When Jessica returned with her coffee, I kept my eyes closed, pretending to sleep. I couldn't bear to see the triumph in her face, the satisfaction of having been proven right. "How is she?" I heard her ask Patricia. "Heartbroken," Patricia answered, her voice uncharacteristically hard, in more ways than one. "This is exactly why I did what I did," Jessica said defensively. "She can't be trusted to make good decisions right now. Going to the storage unit? Sneaking around behind my back? She could have died, Aunt Patricia. She's not a child, Jessica. She's your mother, a woman who has lived independently for 68 years, who raised you, who took care of your father through cancer. She deserves better than to be treated like an incompetent invalid." "The doctors disagree," Jessica replied coldly. "And so does the law. I have guardianship now, and I'll do what's best for her, whether she likes it or not." I kept my breathing steady, my eyes closed, as their conversation continued. But inside, something was changing. The despair was hardening into resolve. Jessica thought she had won, thought she had finally achieved complete control, but she had forgotten something important about me. Something Michael had always found both frustrating and endearing. When backed into a corner, I didn't give up. I got creative, and I played the long game. Jessica might have all the power right now, might have the doctors and the legal documents on her side, but she had underestimated me, and that was a mistake she would soon come to regret. In the hospital, I became a model patient. I smiled at the nurses, thanked the doctors, took my medications without complaint, and cooperated with every test and treatment. When Jessica visited, I was pleasant but subdued, offering no resistance when she explained the new arrangements she had made for my care. "The doctor agrees you need supervision," she told me on my second day. sitting primly in the visitor's chair, her tablet open to a spreadsheet of what appeared to be my medical expenses. "So I've hired a home health aide who will stay with Patricia to help care for you. Her name is Denise, and she comes highly recommended." "That's thoughtful," I said mildly, "though I'm sure Patricia and I could manage." Jessica shook her head. "The doctor was quite clear, Mom. You need professional supervision. Your heart can't take any more stress or exertion." She tapped at her tablet. "The trust will cover Denise's salary, of course. 4 hours a day to start, then we'll reassess." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Whatever you think is best, dear." Jessica looked up sharply, clearly surprised by my compliance. "Well, good. I'm glad you understand this is for your own safety." Inside, I was calculating. A home health aide meant another person in the mix. Someone not related to me. Someone who might be an ally if approached correctly. Someone who would report to Jessica if I showed any signs of rebellion, but who might be sympathetic to an elderly woman's desire for basic dignity and autonomy. When I was released from the hospital the next day, Patricia and the newly hired Denise came to pick me up. Denise was younger than I'd expected, perhaps in her mid-30s, with warm brown skin and an easy smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm so glad to meet you," she said, helping me from the wheelchair the hospital insisted upon to Patricia's waiting car. "I've heard a lot about you from your daughter. All good things, I hope," I replied, watching her expression carefully. A flicker of something, discomfort, skepticism, passed across Denise's face before her professional smile returned. "She's very concerned about your well-being," she said diplomatically. Interesting. Not a ringing endorsement of Jessica's version of events. I filed this observation away for future reference. Back at Patricia's condo, Denise helped me settle into the guest room, which now featured several new medical additions. A blood pressure monitor, a pill organizer with multiple compartments, an emergency call button. Jessica had been busy. "I'll be coming every day from 10 to 2, Denise explained, unpacking my bag from the hospital. "I'll help with your medications, some light physical therapy exercises the doctor recommended, meal preparation, and anything else you need." "That's very kind," I said, easing myself onto the edge of the bed. "Have you been a home health aide for long?" 5 years, she replied. "But before that, I was a nurse at Riverside General for a decade. I switched to home care when my son was born. More flexible hours. A nurse. Even better. Someone with medical training. Someone who understood patient rights and dignity. Someone who might recognize the difference between necessary care and unnecessary control." "You must have seen all kinds of family situations in your work," I observed. Denise glanced at me, understanding in her eyes. "All kinds," she agreed quietly. "Some more complicated than others." "And how do you navigate those complications?" I asked, keeping my tone conversational. She hung my robe in the small closet, her back to me as she replied, "I remember that my primary responsibility is to my patient, their well-being, their dignity." She turned, meeting my eyes directly. "Their autonomy, to whatever extent their condition allows." A warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with my heart condition. This woman understood. Without my saying a word, she understood exactly what was happening. "I think we'll get along just fine, Denise," I said. She smiled, a real smile this time, not the professional mask. "I think so too, Mrs. Mitchell." Over the next week, I continued my strategy of compliance and patience. I took my medications without question, performed the gentle exercises Denise guided me through, ate the heart-healthy meals she prepared, and rested when she suggested it. When Jessica called each evening for a report, I could hear Denise's positive assessment. "Your mother is doing very well, following all recommendations. Blood pressure stable." After each call, Denise would give me a small, conspiratorial smile. She never said anything directly critical of Jessica's oversight, maintaining her professional boundaries, but I could sense her awareness of the situation and her quiet support. Patricia was less circumspect. "She treats you like you're incapacitated," she fumed one evening after Jessica had called with a detailed list of instructions about my care. "As if you haven't been taking care of yourself, and everyone else, your entire life." "She's afraid," I said, surprising myself with the insight. "She nearly lost me twice now. Fear makes people do strange things." "Fear doesn't excuse treating you like a child," Patricia insisted, "or selling your house without permission." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't. But understanding her motivation helps me plan my response. Patricia raised an eyebrow. Plan your response? What exactly are you plotting, Ellie? I smiled, patting her hand. Nothing dramatic, just reclaiming my life, one small step at a time. The first step was information gathering. During our daily sessions, I asked Denise careful questions about patient rights, about the requirements for guardianship, about the difference between temporary medical oversight and permanent legal control. These arrangements your daughter has made, Denise told me one morning as she checked my blood pressure. They're intended for your recovery period, not forever. But the power of attorney she has is for when you can't make your own decisions, Denise finished firmly. From what I can see, Mrs. Mitchell, you're perfectly capable of making decisions. You're oriented, your cognitive function is excellent, you understand your medical situation completely. My daughter would disagree, I said wryly. She thinks the fact that I had another heart attack proves I can't be trusted to take care of myself. Denise recorded my blood pressure reading, slightly elevated, but within normal range for someone my age with my condition, and sat back, considering her words carefully. Many of my patients have had multiple health crises, she said finally. That doesn't mean they give up their right to self-determination. Recovery isn't just physical. It's about regaining independence, confidence, control over your life. And if family members interfere with that process, she met my eyes steadily, then sometimes other professionals need to get involved. Social workers, patient advocates. She paused. Legal counsel, if necessary. I nodded, absorbing this. I see. Mrs. Mitchell, Denise said, leaning forward slightly. If you don't mind me asking, what happened with your house? Your daughter mentioned you'd recently moved in with your sister, but you're wondering why I look like someone going through grief rather than someone who chose to downsize. I finished for her. She nodded, her expression sympathetic. So I told her about waking up from heart surgery to discover my home had been sold without my knowledge or consent, about my belongings being dispersed, donated, stored away, about Jessica's insistence that it was all for my own good, that I couldn't be trusted to live independently anymore. Denise listened without interrupting, her face growing increasingly troubled. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. That's not right, she said finally, her voice low but intense. No matter her intentions, no matter what legal documents she had, that wasn't right. No, I agreed quietly. It wasn't. Have you considered consulting an attorney? Elder law is a specialized field, but there are good lawyers who... I'm considering all options, I interrupted gently. But I need to be strategic. Jessica controls my finances now through this trust she's set up. I'd need access to money to hire a lawyer. Denise frowned. You should be receiving statements for the trust. As the beneficiary, you have a right to see how the money is being managed. I hadn't thought of that. I haven't received anything yet. Ask for it, Denise advised. Casually, not confrontationally. Just express interest in understanding how the trust works, what your monthly allowance will be, how medical expenses are being handled. She stood up, gathering her blood pressure equipment. Information is power, Mrs. Mitchell. The more you know, the better position you'll be in to reclaim control of your life. After Denise left that afternoon, I sat in Patricia's small spare room, looking out the window at the regimented rows of identical condos in this retirement community. This wasn't where I belonged. This wasn't where I would end my days, if I had any say in the matter. And slowly, step by step, I was going to make sure I did have a say. That evening when Jessica called, I was ready. How are you feeling, Mom? She asked. The same question she began every call with, her tone suggesting she expected a litany of complaints or health concerns. Much better, I said cheerfully. Denise says my blood pressure is stabilizing nicely. Good. That's good. Jessica sounded distracted. I could hear papers rustling in the background. Always working, my daughter, even during family calls. I spoke to Dr. Winters today. He thinks you're making good progress but wants to see you again next week. I'll look forward to it, I said. Jessica, I've been thinking. I'd like to understand more about the trust you've established. How it works. What the terms are. The rustling stopped. The trust? Why? Just curious, I said lightly. It's my money after all. I'd like to know how it's being managed. A pause. It's being managed for your benefit, Mom. That's all you need to worry about. I'm not worried, I assured her. Just interested. I taught economics for a few years, before I switched to second grade. I've always found financial structures fascinating. Another pause. Longer this time. I'll bring the most recent statement next time I visit. It's all quite straightforward. The house proceeds, and your savings are invested conservatively, and the income covers your care expenses, with a small monthly allowance for personal needs. That sounds sensible, I agreed. I'd still like to see the details, though, and the original trust document. I don't think I've ever read it properly. Jessica's tone cooled. You signed it, Mom, before your surgery. Did I? I kept my voice innocent. I don't recall that at all. The medication they gave me before the operation. It made everything so foggy. Well, you did, Jessica said shortly. But if you want to read it again, fine. I'll bring a copy. Thank you, dear. That would be very helpful. I paused, then added, and I've been wondering about David. Have you told him about all these changes? About the house? A guilty silence. Then, not yet. He's been so busy with that big project at work and with the time difference. I didn't want to worry him. Translation. Jessica hadn't told her brother that she'd sold their mother's house and taken control of her finances. Interesting. I'd like to talk to him, I said. It's been too long, and I miss him. Could you send me his number? I seem to have lost my phone contacts when my old phone disappeared during the move. Mom, David doesn't need to be bothered with all this right now. Once everything is settled and you're more stable... Jessica, I interrupted firmly. I want to talk to my son. Please send me his number. Her sigh was audible. Fine. I'll text it to Aunt Patricia's phone. But please don't upset him with a lot of details about your health. You know how he worries. I just want to hear his voice, I said truthfully. To catch up on his life. To hear about Lisa and their plans. After we hung up, I sat back with a small smile of satisfaction. Step 1 accomplished. I'd established my right to information about my own finances. Step 2 in progress. Reconnecting with David, without Jessica's filtering and control. The next day, Jessica texted David's number to Patricia's phone, as promised. I waited until Denise had left for the day, wanting privacy for this important conversation. Patricia handed me her phone, and then tactfully left the room, mentioning something about checking the mail. David answered on the third ring, his voice instantly warming when he realized it was me. Mom! God, it's good to hear your voice. How are you feeling? Better every day, I said, tears springing to my eyes at the sound of my son's voice. Despite looking more like Michael, David had always been more like me in temperament. Reflective, intuitive, attuned to emotional undercurrents that Jessica often missed in her focus on practical matters. Jessica said you had another heart attack, he continued, concern evident. But that you're recovering well? Yes, it was minor compared to the first one. I'm staying with Aunt Patricia for now while I regain my strength. That makes sense, David said. Better than being alone in that big house. Though I know how much you love it there. My breath caught. David, do you think I'm still in my house? Just staying with Patricia temporarily? A confused pause. Well, yeah, that's what Jessica said. That you were recuperating at Patricia's but would probably go home once you were stronger, unless you decided the house was too much to manage now. I closed my eyes, absorbing the depth of Jessica's deception. She hadn't just hidden the truth from her brother. She had actively lied to him. David, I said carefully, there's something you need to know. The house is gone. Jessica sold it while I was in the hospital without telling me. I found out when she brought me there after my discharge. Brought me to say goodbye, not to go home. There was a new family already living there. The silence that followed was so complete, I thought we might have been disconnected. Then David's voice came back, low and furious. She did what? She sold it. Used the power of attorney I signed years ago. All my things are either gone or in storage. She set up a trust with the proceeds which she controls as trustee. I get a monthly allowance. The bitterness crept into my voice despite my efforts to remain calm. Jesus Christ, David whispered. Mom, I had no idea, I swear. She told me you were doing well, that everything was under control, that I didn't need to fly out because you had plenty of support. She wasn't wrong about the support, I said, thinking of Patricia and Denise. But the rest? David, I feel like I've been erased. Like my life isn't my own anymore. This is insane, he said, and I could hear him moving around, probably pacing as he always did when upset. She can't just do that. Sell your house? Without even telling you, let alone getting your permission. That can't be legal. I'm not sure, I admitted. The power of attorney gives her broad authority, especially if doctors determine I'm not capable of making my own decisions. After this second heart attack, she's had me declared essentially incompetent. She's now my legal guardian. Guardian? Mom, you're not incompetent. You're one of the sharpest people I know. His indignation warmed me, but I needed to stay focused. The problem is, I need legal help to fight this, but I don't have access to money for a lawyer. Jessica controls everything now. David was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, I'm coming out there. Next week, I'll book a flight tonight. David, your work can wait. This is more important, and I'll bring Lisa. She has a friend from law school who specializes in elder law now. We'll get help, Mom. Real help. For the first time since waking up in the hospital after my surgery, I felt a surge of genuine hope. That would mean so much, I said softly. Just to see you would be enough. But the legal help, we'll fix this, David promised, determination in his voice. What Jessica's done, it's not right. Whatever her intentions, however she's justifying it to herself, it's not right. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, processing the conversation. David was coming. David believed me, supported me, was ready to fight for me, and he was bringing legal connections that might help me regain control of my life. It was a turning point. The first real chance I'd had since waking up to discover my life had been dismantled. I thought of Michael, of what he would say if he could see what was happening. His face when angry was always calm, controlled, but with a fire in his eyes that signaled his determination. No one messes with the Mitchell family, he'd say whenever someone tried to take advantage of us. Well, someone was messing with this Mitchell, and it was time to fight back. Patricia returned from her mysterious mail check, eyeing me with concern. Everything okay with David? Better than okay, I told her, a genuine smile spreading across my face. He's coming to visit, next week. And he's bringing reinforcements. Patricia raised an eyebrow. Reinforcements? Legal ones, I confirmed. It's time to reclaim what's mine, Patricia. My money, my independence, my life. About time, my sister said, her own smile appearing. The Eleanor Mitchell I know doesn't let anyone push her around, not even her own daughter. That night, for the first time since my surgery, I slept deeply and dreamlessly. No anxiety, no grief, no sense of helplessness. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Purpose, direction, the beginning of power. Jessica had awakened something in me that she hadn't anticipated. Not fear, not compliance, not resignation to a diminished existence. No, she had awakened the fighter in me, the woman who had faced down generations of unruly second graders, who had nursed a husband through terminal cancer, who had rebuilt a life after becoming a widow. I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. And Jessica was about to discover exactly what kind of woman had raised her. Jessica arrived the following Sunday with the trust documents she'd promised to bring, along with Emma and Tyler in tow, again using my grandchildren as buffers against any potential confrontation. What she didn't bring was any awareness that her carefully constructed plan was about to face its first serious challenge. "Grandma," Emma exclaimed, giving me a gentle hug. At 17, she was all long limbs and self-consciousness. Her hair dyed a subtle purple at the ends in what I assumed was her small act of rebellion against Jessica's preference for order and conformity. "You look so much better than Mom said you would." "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, hugging her back. "I feel better every day." Tyler gave me a slightly awkward side hug, then immediately pulled out his phone. "Mom said you might be able to help with my history project still? About the 1970s? "I'd love to," I assured him. "I have plenty of stories about those days." Jessica set a folder on Patricia's coffee table. "The trust documents you asked for, Mom. But let's not bore the kids with financial talk. How about I make some tea, and we can catch up first?" She disappeared into Patricia's kitchen, where I could hear her opening cabinets and moving things around, reorganizing as she always did in any space she occupied. Patricia, who had been quietly reading in the corner, rolled her eyes at me but said nothing. I took the opportunity to speak to my grandchildren without their mother hovering. "I'm so glad you both came today. I've missed you terribly." Emma sat beside me on the couch. "Mom said you've been too sick for visitors, that your heart needed rest. My heart is doing just fine now, I assured her, especially with you two here. I lowered my voice slightly. And I have exciting news. Uncle David is coming to visit next week, with Aunt Lisa. Both teenagers brightened at this. David and Lisa were the cool relatives, the ones who lived in Seattle, who worked in creative fields, who sent unusual Christmas gifts and took the kids to inappropriate movies when they visited. Awesome, Tyler said, looking up from his phone. Mom didn't mention that. It's a recent development, I said carefully. They're arriving on Thursday. Does Mom know? Emma asked, always the more perceptive of the two. Not yet, I admitted. I thought I'd tell her today. Emma's eyes narrowed slightly. Something in my tone must have alerted her that there was more to the story. She had always been sensitive to undercurrents, even as a small child. Is everything okay, Grandma? She asked quietly. Between you and Mom, I mean? Before I could answer, Jessica returned carrying a tray with tea and cookies, Patricia trailing behind her with a pained expression that told me Jessica had completely rearranged her kitchen. Here we are, Jessica announced brightly. Mom's favorite chamomile tea and some heart-healthy oatmeal cookies. I accepted a cup, noting that Jessica had automatically added the precise amount of honey I preferred. Whatever her faults, my daughter knew me well. Thank you, dear. This looks lovely. We settled into awkward small talk. The kids' school activities, Robert's busy accounting practice, the unseasonably warm weather. I waited for a natural pause before dropping my news. I heard from David yesterday, I said casually. He and Lisa are flying in on Thursday for a visit. Jessica's teacup froze halfway to her lips. David? Coming here? He didn't mention anything to me. It was a last-minute decision, I explained. He has some vacation days to use before the end of the year, and he wanted to see how I was doing in person. Jessica set her cup down carefully. Well, that's nice, though unnecessary. You're doing fine, and he's always so busy. Did he book a hotel? He and Lisa will stay with me, Patricia interjected smoothly. I have the pull-out sofa in the den. It will be cozy, but we'll manage. How long are they staying? Jessica asked, her tone still carefully neutral, though I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. A week, I believe, I replied. David mentioned something about helping me sort through some of the things in storage, to decide what to keep and what to let go. A flash of alarm crossed Jessica's face before she controlled it. That's really not necessary. I've already been through everything, but you wouldn't know what's meaningful to me and what isn't, I interrupted gently. Some things might seem like junk to you, but hold precious memories for me. Emma was watching this exchange with increasing interest, her gaze bouncing between her mother and me like a spectator at a tennis match. Tyler, less attuned to subtext, was scrolling through his phone, though I noticed he glanced up occasionally, perhaps sensing the tension. Well, we can discuss that later, Jessica said dismissively. She gestured to the folder on the coffee table. The trust documents are all there, as you requested, though I'm not sure what you're hoping to find. It's all very standard. I picked up the folder but didn't open it. I'll review it later when I can give it my full attention. Thank you for bringing it. Jessica nodded, clearly relieved to move past the topic. Tyler, didn't you want to ask Grandma about your history project? For the next hour, I entertained my grandchildren with stories about the 1970s, the music, the fashion, the political climate. I told them about attending protest rallies with Michael, about the excitement of the early environmental movement, about how different the world had been before computers and cell phones dominated daily life. Tyler recorded parts of our conversation on his phone for his project, while Emma asked thoughtful questions about how it had felt to live through such a transformative time. It was the most normal, most enjoyable interaction I'd had with them in months, and I treasured every minute of it. As they were preparing to leave, Emma hung back while Tyler and Jessica gathered their things. Grandma, she said quietly, is something wrong between you and Mom? You seem different with each other. I considered how to answer. Emma was 17, on the cusp of adulthood. She deserved honesty, but I didn't want to drag her into the middle of the conflict with her mother. Your mom and I have different ideas about what's best for me right now, I said carefully. We're working through it. Emma nodded, her expression serious. Is that why Uncle David is coming? To help work it out? Something like that, I admitted. She squeezed my hand. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better. And I'm glad you're not living in that big house alone anymore. Mom said you were having trouble managing it. I bit back my instinctive response. that the house had been managing just fine until Jessica decided otherwise, and simply smiled. Change is hard at any age, sweetheart, but I'm adjusting. After they left, I took the trust documents into the guest room and sat down to read them carefully. Patricia brought me a magnifying glass from her craft supplies and a legal pad for making notes. Want me to look with you? She offered. 4 eyes are better than 2. I shook my head. Let me go through it first, then we can discuss it. The document was dense with legal terminology, but I'd always been a careful reader. Michael and I had reviewed every contract, every investment prospectus, every insurance policy in detail throughout our married life. Fine print matters, he'd always said. And now, more than ever, I needed to understand exactly what Jessica had committed me to. As I read, I made notes of key provisions. The trust was irrevocable, meaning it couldn't be undone without court intervention. Jessica was named as sole trustee, with David as successor trustee only in the event of her death or incapacity. The stated purpose was to provide for the care and maintenance of Eleanor Mitchell for the remainder of her natural life. The financial details were enlightening. The house had indeed sold for an impressive sum in the hot real estate market, nearly double what Michael and I had paid for it 35 years earlier, even accounting for inflation. My personal savings and investments had been liquidated and added to the trust, creating a substantial pool of assets. Jessica had arranged for the funds to be invested conservatively, with the income designated for my care expenses. The home health aid, medical costs not covered by Medicare, food, clothing, and a monthly personal needs allowance of $200. $200 a month. For a woman who had managed her own finances for nearly 7 decades, who had helped put 2 children through college, who had paid off a mortgage 15 years early through careful budgeting and strategic extra payments. But the most revealing aspect of the trust was buried on page 17 in a section titled Remainder Beneficiaries. Upon my death, any assets remaining in the trust would be divided equally between Jessica and David. Given the size of the trust and the relatively modest expenses for my care, unless I lived to be 120 years old, there would be a substantial inheritance for my children. I sat back, processing this information. Jessica had positioned herself as my protector, claiming that her actions were solely about ensuring my safety and proper care. But the trust she'd created essentially ensured that a significant portion of my assets would eventually pass to her. Money that would otherwise have been spent on my chosen lifestyle in my own home, or perhaps donated to causes I cared about, or used to help my grandchildren with college expenses, now locked away, waiting for my death to be divided between my children. I didn't begrudge Jessica and David an inheritance. Michael and I had always planned to leave them whatever we had left when we died, but we had also planned to live fully until that time, to make our own decisions about our money and our home, to age on our own terms. Jessica had short-circuited that plan, effectively placing me in a financial guardianship that limited my choices and controlled my daily life, all while positioning herself to benefit eventually from the assets she'd taken from me. I was still pondering these implications when Patricia knocked softly on the door. "Ellie, you have a visitor." I looked up, confused. "At this hour? Who?" "It's Denise," Patricia said. "I know it's Sunday and not her usual workday, but she says it's important." Curious, I set aside the trust documents and went to the living room, where Denise stood looking uncharacteristically nervous. She was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, rather than her usual work scrubs. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, "I'm sorry to bother you on a Sunday, but there's something I thought you should see right away." She glanced at Patricia. "Something private?" Patricia nodded. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need me," she said, tactfully withdrawing. Once we were alone, Denise sat beside me on the couch. "I was at Storage King today," she said, without preamble. "My brother works there as a weekend manager. I mentioned your situation to him. Not all the details, just that your daughter had moved your belongings into storage after selling your house while you were hospitalized." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "He was concerned," Denise went on. "Said it didn't sound right, so he looked up the rental agreement for Unit 217. She hesitated. "Mrs. Mitchell, the unit isn't rented in your name, or even your daughter's. It's registered to a company called Turner Property Holdings." "Turner," I repeated. "That's my son-in-law's last name." "Yes," Denise confirmed. It appears to be some kind of business entity. My brother said the billing address is a P.O. box, not a residential address. I frowned, trying to make sense of this. Why would my belongings be stored under Robert's business name? Denise reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. That's what I wondered. So my brother did a little more digging, technically against company policy, but he was concerned. She handed me the paper. This is a printout of the payment history for the unit. It's paid through the end of this month, but there's a note in the system that it won't be renewed. I unfolded the paper, scanning the payment information. Won't be renewed? What happens to the contents when storage isn't renewed? Denise's expression was grim. After 30 days of non-payment, the contents are considered abandoned. Storage King auctions them off to recoup the rental fees. The implication hit me like a physical blow. They're planning to let my belongings, my entire life, be sold at auction? Without even telling me? It looks that way, Denise said quietly. My brother said these business entities often use storage units temporarily during property transitions. It's not uncommon for them to abandon contents they don't consider valuable. I stood up abruptly, anger coursing through me. Patricia, I called. Could you come in here, please? My sister appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. What's wrong? We need to go to Storage King, I said firmly. Now, tonight. I need to get some things from that unit before it's too late. Patricia looked from me to Denise in confusion. What's happening? Denise quickly explained the situation while I went to the guest room to get my purse and a jacket. By the time I returned, Patricia had grabbed her car keys and was already heading for the door. Let's go, she said grimly. Denise, can your brother let us in? He's there until closing at 8 all, Denise confirmed, checking her watch. We have about 2 hours. The drive to Storage King took less than 30 minutes with Sunday evening's light traffic. Patricia parked near the office, and we all went inside, where a young man with Denise's same warm brown eyes and easy smile looked up from a computer. Mrs. Mitchell, he said, standing to greet me. I'm Marcus, Denise's brother. She explained your situation. Thank you for your help, I said, shaking his hand. I understand the unit with my belongings may not be renewed next month. Marcus nodded, his expression sympathetic. That's what the system shows. The company that rents it, Turner Property Holdings, has a pattern of short-term rentals. They typically use units during real estate transactions, then clear them out or abandon them. Can I access the unit tonight? There are some things I need to retrieve. Marcus hesitated. The unit isn't in your name, Mrs. Mitchell. Technically, I shouldn't allow access without authorization from the rental holder. These are my possessions, I said firmly. My daughter moved them here without my permission while I was hospitalized. I'm not asking to empty the unit, just to take a few personal items that are rightfully mine. Marcus glanced at his sister, who gave him a small nod. All right, he decided. I'll let you in. But I'd suggest taking only what's most important to you. Documents, family heirlooms, irreplaceable items. If there's a dispute later, I don't want to be in the middle of it. That's all I want, I assured him. Just the things that matter most. He led us to Unit 217, unlocking it with his master key. The space looked just as it had during my visit with Margaret. Boxes stacked neatly, a few pieces of furniture, the physical remnants of my life compressed into a 10x15 room. I'll leave you to it, Marcus said. Take your time, but we close in about an hour and a half. Once he'd gone, I stood for a moment, surveying the contents of the unit. What to take, what to prioritize, what might be lost forever if I left it behind. Let's be systematic, Patricia suggested. Start with documents, then photos and keepsakes, whatever we can fit in the car. We began opening boxes, quickly sorting through contents. In the box labeled Important Papers, I found birth certificates, old tax returns, the deed to the now-sold house, and something unexpected, a folder containing Michael's journals, which I'd assumed were among the items Jessica had discarded. I opened one of the journals, recognizing Michael's neat engineer's handwriting. It was from the year we'd bought the house, filled with his thoughts on the purchase, his plans for renovations, his hopes for our future there. I clutched it to my chest, overwhelmed with gratitude that this piece of him had survived Jessica's purge. In another box labeled simply, Michael, I found his collection of first edition engineering books, his cherished pocket watch passed down from his grandfather, and a small wooden box containing the love letters we'd exchanged during our courtship. These, too, I set aside to take with us. As we continued our search, I found photo albums, family videos, the quilts my grandmother had made, and a small jewelry box containing pieces Jessica had deemed not valuable enough to include in the velvet pouch she'd given me, including the charm bracelet Michael had added to each year on our anniversary, each charm representing a significant event in our lives together. Patricia found boxes containing my personal journals, my collection of first edition children's books from my teaching days, and the small ceramic figures the children in my classes had made for me over the years, each carefully wrapped in tissue paper. "Ellie, look at this," Patricia said suddenly, holding up a folder she'd found in a box labeled Taxes 2015-2020. I took it from her, opening it to find documents I'd never seen before, papers creating the Turner Property Holdings LLC, with Robert listed as the managing member and Jessica as a 50% owner. Additional pages showed property transactions, houses purchased, renovated, and sold for profit over the past 3 years. And there, on a balance sheet dated just weeks after my bypass surgery, was a line item that made my blood run cold. Mitchell Property Acquisition, with a date that matched the sale of my house, and a note about pending renovation for market listing. "They're planning to flip my house," I said, the realization dawning with sickening clarity. Jessica and Robert didn't sell my house to secure my future. They're using it as part of their real estate business. Are you sure?" Patricia asked, leaning over to look at the documents. "The numbers match exactly," I confirmed, comparing the sale amount on the house documents to the figure on the Turner Property Holdings balance sheet. They used the power of attorney to transfer my house to their company, probably at below market value, then sold it from the company for the full amount. I flipped through more pages. "And look here, plans for a complete remodel, with projected resale value nearly 30% higher than the purchase price." "That's fraud," Denise said quietly. She had been helping us sort through boxes, but now stood reading over my shoulder. "Using a power of attorney for self-dealing is explicitly forbidden." "Yes," I agreed grimly. "It is." I tucked the folder into the growing pile of items we were taking. "This changes everything." For the next hour, we continued our methodical sorting, filling Patricia's car with the most important and irreplaceable items: documents, photos, keepsakes, heirlooms. By the time Marcus came to tell us they were closing, we had rescued the heart of my life's collection, the tangible memories that Jessica had hidden away. "Thank you," I told him sincerely. "You've helped more than you know. I hope you get things sorted out with your daughter," he said, relocking the unit. "Family situations can be complicated, but this doesn't seem right." In the car driving back to Patricia's condo, I sat with Michael's journal open in my lap, drawing strength from his words written decades ago. "The house isn't just a building," he'd written. "It's the shell that will protect our family, the walls that will witness our lives. I want to make it perfect for Ellie, for our children, for all the years ahead." Those years had played out just as he'd hoped. The house had sheltered us through joy and sorrow, had grown and changed as we had, and now it was being treated as nothing more than a financial asset, a property to be flipped for profit by the daughter who had grown up within its walls. "What will you do now?" Patricia asked, glancing at me as she drove. I closed the journal, my decision already made. Now I fight back, with everything I have. The documents we'd found were more than memories. They were evidence of Jessica's true motives, of the financial self-dealing that invalidated her claim to be acting solely in my best interests, evidence that would support the legal challenge David was bringing with him. Jessica had hidden my belongings away, planning to let them be sold off anonymously when their storage was no longer convenient. She had hidden her business dealings, using my house for her own financial gain, while pretending to be the dutiful daughter securing her mother's future. She had hidden the truth from David, from her children, perhaps even from herself. But secrets have a way of emerging into the light. And now, with Michael's journals in my lap, and the evidence of Jessica's deception safely retrieved, I felt a power returning that I hadn't experienced since waking up in the hospital to discover my life had been dismantled. It wasn't just anger, though that burned steady and strong. It wasn't just determination, though that fueled every decision. It was clarity, the absolute certainty that what had been done to me was wrong, and that I had not only the right, but the obligation to fight it, for myself, for Michael's memory, and for every older person who faced having their autonomy stripped away by those who claimed to know better. Jessica had awakened this clarity in me, though surely not intentionally, and now she would face its consequences. The morning after our rescue mission to the storage unit, I called David to update him on what we discovered. His reaction was a mixture of shock and rage. "They're using your house for their flipping business, while pretending it was all for your care?" His voice rose with each word. "That's beyond wrong, Mom. It's criminal." "That's what Denise said," I agreed, keeping my own voice calm and measured. "David, I need you to do something before you come. Can you contact that lawyer friend of Lisa's? See if she can recommend someone local who specializes in elder law and financial abuse cases?" "Already on it," David assured me. "Lisa called her yesterday. She's sending over names today, and I'll start making calls. We'll have someone lined up before we arrive." "Good," I said. "And one more thing. Don't tell Jessica you're coming. I know you usually let her know your travel plans, but this time I think the element of surprise might work in our favor." "Agreed," David said firmly. "The less warning she has, the better. She won't have time to hide evidence or create a story to explain all this." After we hung up, I spent the morning organizing the documents we'd rescued from the storage unit, creating clear categories: financial records, property documents, and most importantly, the Turner Property Holdings papers that revealed Jessica and Robert's true intentions for my house. Patricia helped, bringing me sticky notes and folders from her small home office. "You know," she said as we worked, "I always thought Jessica was just being overprotective. Controlling, yes, but out of genuine concern. This," she gestured to the Turner Property Holdings folder, "this is something else entirely." "Yes," I agreed quietly. "It is." The realization that my daughter's actions weren't merely misguided protectiveness, but calculated financial exploitation was still settling into my consciousness, a weight that pressed against my heart more painfully than any cardiac condition. But I couldn't afford to dwell on that hurt now. I needed to channel my energy into action, into reclaiming what was rightfully mine. Denise arrived at her usual time, bringing not just her medical kit, but a gift, a small notebook with a beautiful floral cover. "I thought you might want to keep track of everything," she explained, setting it beside me. "Conversations, plans, ideas, it helps to have it all in one place." I thanked her, touched by the thoughtfulness. As she checked my blood pressure and reviewed my medications, I noticed a new determination in her manner. "Your blood pressure is slightly elevated," she noted, "but given the circumstances, that's not surprising. Just remember to take your medications on schedule and try to rest between preparations." The slight pause and meaningful look told me everything I needed to know. Denise was fully in my corner now, her professional discretion balanced against her ethical commitment to patient autonomy. "I've been thinking," she said as she packed up her equipment. "Your daughter checks in with me daily about your condition." "Yes, I've noticed those evening calls." Denise nodded. "It might be useful if I continue to report that you're following all recommendations, resting appropriately, not showing any signs of independent planning." I smiled at her choice of words. "That would be very helpful, Denise. Thank you." She returned my smile with a conspiratorial one of her own. "Just doing my job, supporting my patient's well-being in all its dimensions." After Denise left, I opened the new notebook and began making lists. First, people I needed to contact before David arrived. My old family doctor who had known me for decades and could attest to my mental competence. Our longtime family attorney who had handled Michael's estate and might not be fully aware of what Jessica had done. The president of my garden club, who could confirm my active community involvement right up until my heart attack. Second, questions for the elder law attorney David was arranging. Could the power of attorney be revoked? Could the house sale be challenged as self-dealing? What about the trust? Could it be dissolved or modified? Could my legal competency be formally reestablished? Third, a timeline of events, beginning with my first heart attack 5 years ago and the initial power of attorney, through the recent bypass surgery and Jessica's actions during my hospitalization, up to the discovery of the Turner Property Holdings documents. As I wrote, I felt my mind sharpening, my purpose clarifying. This wasn't just about getting my house back or regaining control of my finances, though those were certainly goals. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my autonomy, my right to determine my own future for however many years I had left. Patricia brought me lunch, setting the tray beside my growing pile of papers. "You look like a general planning a campaign," she observed. That's exactly what I am, I replied, not looking up from my notes. And Jessica has no idea the battle is coming. The next day, while Patricia took me to my follow-up appointment with Dr. Winters, the cardiologist who had performed my bypass surgery, I put the next phase of my plan into action. "Dr. Winters," I said, after he had examined me and declared my recovery on track, "I'd like to discuss something important with you, in private, if possible." I glanced meaningfully at Patricia, who nodded and stepped out of the exam room. Once we were alone, I looked directly at the doctor, a man perhaps 15 years younger than me, with kind eyes and a reputation for listening to his patients. "I need to know exactly what you told my daughter about my condition and my capacity to make my own decisions." He blinked, clearly surprised by the direct question. "Well, Mrs. Mitchell, I informed her about your cardiac status, the success of the surgery, and the recommended recovery protocol. Did you tell her I was mentally incompetent, unable to make my own decisions?" His brow furrowed. "No, certainly not. There's never been any question about your cognitive function." "Then why did you agree when she sought guardianship after my second heart attack, when she claimed I was a danger to myself?" Dr. Winters looked genuinely confused. "Guardianship? I didn't sign off on any guardianship proceedings, Mrs. Mitchell. I simply confirmed that you'd experienced a second cardiac event and should follow a careful recovery plan with appropriate support." I took a deep breath, processing this new information. "So you never told her that I couldn't live independently or make my own decisions?" "No," he said firmly. "I recommended a period of recovery with support, certainly. But many of my patients return to independent living after bypass surgery. It depends on their overall health, their compliance with medications, their home situation, and many other factors. Would you be willing to put that in writing?" I asked. "A statement confirming that I am mentally competent and, with appropriate medical management, capable of making my own decisions about my living situation and finances." He studied me for a long moment. "Has something happened that I should know about, Mrs. Mitchell?" "My daughter sold my house while I was in the hospital," I said simply, "without my knowledge or consent. She's placed all my assets in a trust she controls, and has told me I can no longer live independently due to my health." Dr. Winters' expression shifted from confusion to concern. "I see. That's not what I would have recommended based on your medical condition. So, you'll provide the statement?" He nodded slowly. "Yes. I'll have my office prepare something today. You can pick it up tomorrow. And Mrs. Mitchell," he hesitated, "if you need me to speak to your daughter about realistic expectations for your recovery and capabilities, I'm happy to do so." "Thank you, doctor," I said, emotion suddenly tightening my throat. But I think this has gone beyond a simple misunderstanding of medical advice. When I emerged from the exam room, Patricia was waiting, a questioning look on her face. I gave her a small nod, and she squeezed my hand in silent support. On the way home, we stopped at a bank where I'd had an account for decades, long before Michael's death. It was a separate account from the joint ones Jessica had emptied into the trust, a small savings account in my name, only that I'd maintained from my teaching days. I wasn't sure if Jessica even knew it existed, and I prayed it had escaped her financial sweep. "I'd like to check my balance, please," I told the teller, presenting my ID. "And I no longer have my ATM card." The teller tapped on her computer, then looked up with a smile. "Your balance is $4,153.89, Mrs. Mitchell. Would you like to make a withdrawal today?" Relief washed over me. The account was intact, not a fortune, but enough to retain a lawyer, to begin the process of reclaiming my independence. "Yes, please. I'd like to withdraw $2,000 and get a new ATM card." As we left the bank, cash secured safely in my purse along with the promise of a new card to be mailed to Patricia's address, I felt a surge of confidence. I had resources now, not just information and allies, but actual funds that Jessica couldn't control. That evening, Jessica called for her usual check-in. I answered with practiced calm, sharing innocuous details about my day, and carefully omitting any mention of the bank, Dr. Winters' promised letter, or the documents rescued from storage. "Denise says you've been resting well," Jessica said, approval in her voice. "That's good, Mom. Your body needs time to heal." "Yes, dear," I agreed mildly. "I'm following all the recommendations. I spoke with the trust manager today," she continued. "Your monthly allowance should be deposited into the new account I set up for you by next week. I'll bring the debit card when I visit this weekend." "Thank you." That's very helpful. I kept my tone neutral, betraying nothing of my inner thoughts. That by next weekend, the carefully constructed cage she'd built around me would be shattered beyond repair. Do you need anything? Any groceries Patricia might be running low on? Or personal items you're missing? The solicitous daughter, the caring guardian, making sure her mother's basic needs were met while systematically dismantling her independence. The contrast made my stomach turn. No, we're well stocked. Patricia is taking good care of me. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the guest bed, my bed now, and looked at the small collection of rescued treasures arranged on the dresser. Michael's pocket watch, the charm bracelet he'd given me, the family photos I'd selected from the albums we'd retrieved, tangible reminders of the life Jessica had attempted to erase. I'm fighting back, Michael, I whispered to his smiling image in our wedding photo. Just like you always said I would if someone pushed me too far. The next few days passed in a flurry of quiet preparation. I collected Dr. Winter's letter confirming my mental competence and physical capability to make my own decisions. I spoke briefly with our old family attorney, who sounded genuinely shocked to learn the extent of Jessica's actions, and promised to review the files immediately. I reconnected with friends from my garden club and former teaching colleagues, rebuilding the social network that had been abruptly severed when Jessica moved me to Patricia's condo. Each night, I updated the notebook Denise had given me, tracking conversations, documenting plans, preparing questions for the attorney David was bringing. I was careful to keep these notes hidden when Jessica called or visited, presenting the compliant, grateful mother she expected to see. The day before David and Lisa were due to arrive, I had Patricia drive me to a small cafe in town, my first real outing beyond medical appointments since leaving the hospital. The fresh air and change of scene lifted my spirits, and as we sat sipping tea and watching people go about their normal lives, I felt a renewed determination. Do you think Jessica will fight back? Patricia asked, voicing the concern that had been hovering at the edges of my thoughts. Without question, I said. She believes she's done the right thing, or at least she's convinced herself of that. And there's the financial aspect now, with the house being part of their business. Patricia nodded soberly. It could get ugly. Probably, I agreed. But I've spent my entire adult life avoiding conflict, accommodating others, putting peace above justice. Not this time. I set down my teacup with quiet firmness. This time I fight for what's mine, for what's right. And if it damages your relationship with Jessica permanently, the question hung in the air between us, the painful possibility I'd been trying not to examine too closely. Could I pursue this battle knowing it might estrange me from my daughter forever? From my grandchildren? Our relationship is already damaged, I said finally. Jessica damaged it when she betrayed my trust, when she used my vulnerability to take everything from me. I'm not the one who broke faith, Patricia, and pretending otherwise won't heal anything. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then we fight. All of us. Together. That night, I lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the quiet sounds of Patricia's condo, so different from the creaks and sighs of my old house. Tomorrow, David would arrive with Lisa and her legal connections. The quiet preparation would shift into active confrontation. Jessica would discover that her careful plans, her controlled narrative, her financial manipulations were all about to unravel. I thought of her as a child, so serious and determined, making lists and organizing her toys with a precision unusual in someone so young. I thought of her as a new mother, approaching parenthood with the same methodical efficiency, schedules posted on the refrigerator, developmental milestones tracked in special apps. I thought of her at Michael's funeral, handling all the arrangements, shielding me from decisions, taking charge as she always did. When had her drive to control, to manage, to direct tipped over from helpful to harmful? When had her concern for my well-being transformed into dismissal of my autonomy? When had she decided that she knew better than I did what was best for my own life? These questions had no easy answers, and dwelling on them would only distract me from the task ahead. What mattered now was not why Jessica had done what she'd done, but what I would do to reclaim my life from her control. As I finally drifted toward sleep, I felt a curious calm settle over me. The initial shock and grief had burned away, leaving a core of quiet resolve. I was Eleanor Mitchell, widow of Michael Mitchell, mother of Jessica and David, grandmother of Emma and Tyler, retired teacher of generations of children. I had lived 68 years with dignity and independence. and I would not spend whatever years I had left as a ward, a dependent, a problem to be managed. Tomorrow, the counterattack would begin, and Jessica was about to discover exactly what kind of woman had raised her. David and Lisa arrived on Thursday afternoon, their rental car pulling into Patricia's driveway just as Denise was finishing her daily visit. The timing couldn't have been better. Denise had already called Jessica with her usual report, mentioning nothing about expected visitors, leaving my daughter completely unaware of what was about to unfold. When David stepped through the door, I felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly overwhelmed me. My son, so like Michael with his lanky frame and serious eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, wrapped me in a gentle hug that conveyed more support than words ever could. "Mom," he said simply, his voice thick with feeling. "We're here now." Lisa hugged me next, her bright blue hair and colorful tattoos a stark contrast to the beige surroundings of Patricia's condo. "We've got your back, Eleanor," she assured me, "and we've brought reinforcements." The reinforcement in question was Andrea Levinson, a trim, silver-haired woman who followed them into the living room carrying a leather briefcase. She had the focused energy of someone who relished complicated challenges, and her handshake was firm as David introduced her. "Ms. Levinson specializes in elder law and financial abuse cases," he explained. "She's agreed to take your case immediately." "Please, call me Andrea," she said, settling onto Patricia's sofa and opening her briefcase. "I've reviewed the documents David sent over, Mrs. Mitchell, and I have to say, this is one of the more egregious cases of power of attorney abuse I've seen in my 20 years of practice." "Then you think we have a case?" I asked, taking a seat across from her. "More than a case," Andrea confirmed. "We have multiple grounds for legal action: breach of fiduciary duty, self-dealing, misrepresentation to medical providers, potentially fraudulent property transfer. The list goes on." She spread several documents on the coffee table: legal forms, petitions, affidavits ready for signatures. "I've prepared emergency motions to freeze the trust assets, to revoke the power of attorney, and to request a competency hearing with an independent evaluator. We can file these tomorrow morning." The speed and decisiveness of her approach was exactly what I needed. After weeks of feeling powerless, of watching my life dismantled piece by piece, finally someone was taking concrete action to help me reclaim what was mine. "What about the house?" I asked. "Is there any way to challenge the sale?" Andrea nodded. "The transfer to Turner Property Holdings creates a strong case for self-dealing, which is explicitly prohibited under power of attorney responsibilities. The fact that your daughter and son-in-law stand to profit from renovating and reselling the property makes it even clearer. We'll petition for the sale to be voided. And the current owners? The young couple who moved in? That's more complicated," she admitted. "If they purchased in good faith, unknowing of the improper nature of the sale, they have certain protections. We may need to negotiate a settlement. Perhaps Turner Property Holdings could provide them with a different property or financial compensation." David, who had been listening intently, leaned forward. "What about Jessica? What kind of consequences could she face for all this?" The question hung in the air, the unspoken tension between seeking justice and the reality that Jessica was still my daughter, still David's sister, still a member of our family. "That depends partly on how she responds when confronted," Andrea said carefully. "If she cooperates, returns control of assets, and acknowledges the impropriety of her actions, we could potentially resolve this without criminal charges. But if she fights us..." She left the sentence unfinished, the implication clear. Patricia, who had been quietly making tea in the kitchen, joined us with a tray of cups. "When do we confront her? And how?" "I suggest tomorrow," Andrea replied, accepting a cup with thanks. "After we've filed the emergency motions. I'd like to meet with her in my office, present the evidence we have, and outline the legal consequences she's facing if she doesn't cooperate fully. I want to be there," I said firmly. "I want to look her in the eye when she realizes what she's done." David looked concerned. "Mom, are you sure that's a good idea? With your heart?" "My heart is stronger than Jessica thinks," I interrupted. "And this isn't just a legal matter, David. It's personal. I need to be part of this confrontation." Andrea studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I understand. And having you present will make the reality of the situation clearer to your daughter. But we'll make sure the environment is controlled, calm, and safe for your health." We spent the next several hours reviewing documents, signing papers, and planning our approach. Andrea was thorough and meticulous, anticipating Jessica's potential arguments and preparing counter-strategies. By evening, we had a clear plan. File the emergency motions first thing in the morning, then call Jessica to request an important family meeting at Andrea's office in the afternoon. After Andrea left, promising to return at 8 a.m. to take me to the courthouse, we ordered takeout and gathered around Patricia's dining table. The atmosphere was somber but determined, like a family war council preparing for battle. "Should we warn Emma and Tyler?" David asked, picking at his pad thai. "They're going to be caught in the middle of this." I'd been wrestling with this question myself. My grandchildren loved both their mother and me. This conflict would inevitably affect them, forcing them to process painful realities about their family. "I think we should talk to them after we've confronted Jessica," I decided finally. "Let her have the opportunity to explain the situation to them herself first. If she won't, then we will, with honesty but also compassion. They're old enough to understand the complexity of what's happened." Lisa, who had been relatively quiet during the legal discussions, spoke up. "What about you, Eleanor? Are you prepared for how Jessica might react? This isn't going to be easy on any level." I appreciated her directness. Lisa had always been the one in the family who asked the difficult emotional questions others avoided. "I'm prepared," I said, more confidently than I felt. I've had weeks to process the betrayal, to move beyond the initial shock and hurt. Now I'm focused on reclaiming my life, my independence, my future. Whatever Jessica's reaction, anger, denial, justification, even genuine remorse, I'm ready to face it. David reached across the table and took my hand. "You won't face it alone, Mom. We're all with you." That night, I slept surprisingly well, without the anxious dreams that had plagued me since discovering my house had been sold. Perhaps it was simply the comfort of knowing David was down the hall, or the relief of finally taking action after weeks of helpless anger. Or perhaps it was the certainty that, win or lose, I was fighting for what was right, for my dignity, for my autonomy, for the life I'd built with Michael and deserved to continue on my own terms. Morning arrived with a sense of purpose. I dressed carefully in one of the few outfits Jessica had deemed worth saving, a navy blue pantsuit that Michael had always said made me look distinguished. I added the pearl earrings he had given me on our 10th anniversary, and the charm bracelet with its collection of memories. Today, I wanted to feel the full weight of my history, my identity, as I prepared to reclaim it. Andrea arrived precisely at 8, as promised, and drove David and me to the county courthouse. Patricia and Lisa stayed behind to prepare for the afternoon confrontation, gathering the key documents and evidence we would present to Jessica. The courthouse was imposingly formal, all marble floors and echoing ceilings, but Andrea navigated its corridors with confident familiarity, leading us to the appropriate offices and guiding me through the signing of multiple affidavits and petitions. The court clerk, a woman about my age with kind eyes, processed our emergency motions with an efficiency that suggested she understood the urgency of elder abuse cases. "The judge will review these immediately," she assured us. "Given the nature of the allegations, I expect you'll have the emergency orders by early afternoon." By noon, we were back at Patricia's condo, the legal wheels now in motion. Andrea's assistant called to confirm that the judge had indeed issued the emergency orders. Jessica's power of attorney was temporarily suspended pending a full hearing. The trust assets were frozen, and a court-appointed examiner would evaluate my competency within the week. "Now we call Jessica," Andrea said, looking to me for confirmation. "Are you ready, Mrs. Mitchell?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Yes, it's time." David made the call, putting it on speaker so we could all hear. Jessica answered on the third ring, her voice brisk and professional. She was at work, in real estate agent mode. "Jessica, it's David. I'm in town, at Aunt Patricia's with Mom." There was a moment of startled silence. "In town? Since when? Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" "We need to meet, Jess, this afternoon. It's important. About Mom's situation." Her voice immediately shifted to the patronizing tone she'd adopted since taking control of my life. "David, I've got everything under control. Mom's being well cared for, her finances are secure. There's really nothing you need to worry about." "That's not how Mom sees it," David replied, his voice steady. "And it's not how our attorney sees it either." Another pause, longer this time. "Attorney? What attorney? What are you talking about?" "We'll explain everything this afternoon. We've reserved a conference room at the offices of Levinson Elder Law. 3 o'clock. The address is 1425 Maple Street, Suite 300. A lawyer? David, this is ridiculous. If you have concerns, we can discuss them as a family. We don't need lawyers involved. 3 o'clock, Jessica, David repeated firmly. It's in your best interest to be there. Trust me on this. After he hung up, we exchanged glances. She'll come, I said with certainty. Jessica never backs down from a confrontation, and her curiosity will get the better of her, even if her conscience doesn't. Andrea nodded. Good. Now, Mrs. Mitchell, let me walk you through what to expect. I'll lead the meeting, presenting the evidence and the court orders first. Then we'll allow your daughter to respond. The key is to remain calm, no matter what she says or how she reacts. Remember that we have the legal high ground here. At 2:30, we left for Andrea's office, a sleek space in a modern building downtown. The conference room she had reserved was businesslike but comfortable, with large windows overlooking the city and a long table that could seat 12. Andrea positioned me at one end of the table, with David beside me and herself opposite where Jessica would sit, a subtle power dynamic that wasn't lost on me. Patricia and Lisa waited in Andrea's private office, ready to join us if needed, but giving space for what would primarily be a confrontation between Jessica and me, with David and Andrea as support and witnesses. At precisely 3 o'clock, the receptionist announced Jessica's arrival. My heart quickened as the door opened and my daughter walked in, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, her expression a mixture of confusion and defensive anger. She stopped short at the sight of the formal conference room arrangement, her eyes darting from me to David to Andrea. What is this? She demanded. What's going on? Andrea rose and extended her hand. Ms. Turner, I'm Andrea Levinson, elder law attorney representing your mother, Eleanor Mitchell. Please, have a seat. We have important matters to discuss. Jessica ignored the outstretched hand, her gaze fixed on me. Mom, you hired a lawyer against me? After everything I've done to help you, to keep you safe, to secure your future? I met her eyes steadily. Sit down, Jessica. Listen to what Ms. Levinson has to say. Then you'll have your chance to speak. Something in my tone, perhaps the unwavering firmness that she hadn't heard from me since her childhood, gave her pause. She sat reluctantly, placing her designer handbag on the table like a shield between us. Ms. Turner, Andrea began, her voice professional but carrying an unmistakable undercurrent of authority. This morning I filed several emergency motions on Mrs. Mitchell's behalf. I have copies for you. She slid a folder across the table. Jessica didn't touch it. The court has issued emergency orders temporarily suspending your power of attorney over your mother, freezing all assets in the Mitchell Family Trust, and appointing an independent evaluator to assess your mother's competency. These orders are effective immediately. Jessica's face paled, then flushed with anger. This is absurd. I have legal guardianship. The doctors agreed Mom can't make her own decisions right now. That's not true, Jessica, I said quietly. Dr. Winters never stated I was incompetent. In fact, he's provided a letter confirming my mental capacity and ability to make my own decisions. Andrea placed the letter on the table. Furthermore, we have evidence of serious breaches of fiduciary duty in your exercise of the power of attorney, specifically, self-dealing in the sale of your mother's home to a business entity in which you have a financial interest. She laid out the Turner Property Holdings documents we'd rescued from storage. Jessica's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her composed facade. These documents show that you transferred your mother's house to Turner Property Holdings, an LLC owned by you and your husband, with plans to renovate and resell the property for significant profit. This constitutes a clear case of self-dealing, which is explicitly forbidden under power of attorney responsibilities. Jessica's gaze darted between the documents and Andrea's face. That's not... She stopped, recalibrated. Everything I did was for Mom's benefit. The house was too much for her to manage. The proceeds went into a trust for her care. A trust you control, David pointed out, with only a small monthly allowance for Mom's personal needs, while the bulk remains untouched, waiting to be inherited when she dies. Jessica turned on him angrily. You have no idea what you're talking about. You've been in Seattle for years, barely visiting, while I've been here dealing with everything, taking care of Mom, managing her health crises, making all the hard decisions that weren't yours to make, I interjected, keeping my voice level despite the emotion churning inside me. Jessica, look at me. Reluctantly, she met my eyes. I am not incompetent. I am not incapable. I had heart surgery. Yes. I need to be careful with my health, yes. But I did not need you to sell my home, dispose of my belongings, and take control of my finances without my knowledge or consent. You weren't in any condition to make those decisions, she insisted. The doctors weren't sure you'd even survive the surgery. But I did survive, I said simply. And instead of coming home to recover in the house I loved, I discovered you had erased my life while I was unconscious. Jessica's expression hardened. I did what needed to be done, what any responsible daughter would do for a parent who can't see that they need help. Andrea intervened smoothly. Ms. Turner, the legal situation is quite clear. Your actions constitute multiple violations of your fiduciary duty under the power of attorney. The evidence of self-dealing with the house sale is particularly problematic from a legal perspective. She leaned forward slightly. This could proceed to criminal charges of financial elder abuse, with serious consequences including fines and potential incarceration. However, Mrs. Mitchell has expressed a preference for resolving this matter without pursuing criminal penalties, if possible. Jessica's face lost all color at the mention of criminal charges. Criminal? This is insane. I was protecting Mom's assets, not stealing them. By transferring her house to your own business entity? David asked skeptically. By planning to flip it for profit while telling me she was still living there? Jessica turned to me, desperation replacing anger in her eyes. Mom, please. Everything I did was for your own good. You have to believe that. I was trying to protect you, to make sure you were taken care of. The plea might have moved me weeks ago, when I was still reeling from the shock of betrayal. But now, seeing her continue to justify her actions even when faced with the evidence of her deception, I felt only a sad clarity. If that were true, I said quietly, you would have consulted me. You would have waited until I was conscious and recovered enough to participate in these decisions. You would have presented options, not fate's accomplice. You would have told David the truth. You would not have hidden my belongings in storage under Robert's company name, with plans to abandon them to auction. She flinched at this last revelation. How did you know about the storage unit? I finished for her. I went there, Jessica. I saw what was left of my life, packed away in boxes you never intended me to see again. Andrea intervened again, redirecting the conversation from emotional confrontation to practical resolution. Ms. Turner, we're prepared to file for full revocation of the power of attorney and dissolution of the trust, along with a civil suit for financial damages and a petition to void the house sale. However, there is another option. She slid another document across the table. This is a voluntary surrender of the power of attorney, a dissolution of the trust with full return of assets to Mrs. Mitchell's control, and an agreement to facilitate the return of the house, either by repurchasing it from the current owners or by providing equivalent financial compensation. Jessica stared at the document, then looked up at me. You want me to just undo everything? Admit I was wrong? That I did something criminal? I want you to recognize that you overstepped, I said. That regardless of your intentions, you took actions that violated my rights and my trust. And yes, I want you to help me reclaim what's mine. My independence, my assets, and if possible, my home. A tense silence filled the room as Jessica appeared to struggle internally, her natural defensiveness battling with the reality of her legal situation. Finally, she reached for the document, scanning it rapidly. If I sign this, she began slowly, the court actions would be dropped, Andrea confirmed, except for the competency evaluation, which would proceed to establish Mrs. Mitchell's clear capacity to manage her own affairs. No criminal charges would be filed. This would become a private family matter rather than a legal case. Jessica looked at me again, something shifting in her expression, perhaps the first glimmer of genuine recognition of the harm she had caused. And what about us? Our relationship? The family? It was the question I'd been dreading, the one that cut to the heart of what had been damaged beyond the financial and legal issues. How could trust be rebuilt after such a profound betrayal? How could our family heal from this wound? That will take time, I said honestly. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired, but it begins with acknowledgement, with making amends, with respecting boundaries going forward. David leaned forward. Jess, No one is saying you can't still be involved in Mom's life, still help where she wants help, still be part of decisions where she wants your input. But it has to be on her terms, not yours. She's still our mother, not a child to be managed. Jessica was silent for a long moment, her eyes downcast. When she looked up again, there was a resignation in her expression I'd rarely seen. Jessica had always fought to the bitter end, never conceding defeat easily. "I'll sign," she said finally, "and I'll talk to Robert about approaching the couple who bought the house. They seem to really love it. They might not be willing to sell back, but we have other properties we could offer them as an exchange." As she reached for a pen, I felt a complex wave of emotions wash over me. Relief that she was cooperating, lingering anger at what she'd done, sadness for the damage to our relationship, and beneath it all, a quiet vindication. I had fought back. I had reclaimed my power. I had refused to be erased. Jessica signed the documents, her usual confident signature slightly shaky. Andrea countersigned as witness, then gathered the papers carefully into her briefcase. "I'll file these with the court immediately," she said. "The trust assets should be unfrozen and returned to Mrs. Mitchell's control within 48 hours. In the meantime, Ms. Turner, I'll need all documentation related to the trust, the house sale, and any other financial actions taken under the power of attorney." Jessica nodded, not meeting anyone's eyes. "I'll have everything sent over tomorrow." An awkward silence fell. The formal, legal part of our confrontation was complete, but the emotional aftermath hung heavy in the air. What did one say after such a reckoning? How did we transition from this battlefield back to being mother and daughter, brother and sister, family? David broke the impasse. "I think we all need some time to process. Jessica, why don't you go home? Talk to Robert. Gather the documents Ms. Levinson needs. Mom and I will head back to Aunt Patricia's. Maybe in a few days, when things have settled a bit, we can talk again, as a family." Jessica nodded mutely, gathering her purse and standing. At the door she paused, turning back to look at me. "Mom, She stopped, struggling for words. "I really did think I was doing what was best for you. I was so scared when they said you might not survive the surgery. I couldn't bear the thought of losing you too after Dad." It was the first genuine emotion she'd shown, the first crack in her defensive justifications. And despite everything, my heart responded to the vulnerability in her voice, to the glimpse of the daughter I knew beneath the controlling, manipulative behavior of recent weeks. "I know, Jessica," I said softly. "Fear makes us do strange things sometimes, but you have to understand, taking away my agency, my independence, my home, that wasn't protecting me. It was hurting me in a different way." She nodded, tears finally welling in her eyes. "I'll fix this. Somehow. I promise." After she left, David let out a long breath, the tension visibly draining from his shoulders. "That went better than I expected, actually." Andrea smiled slightly. "In my experience, when faced with clear evidence and serious legal consequences, most people choose the path of least resistance. Your sister made the rational choice today." "The question is what happens now," I said, suddenly feeling exhausted as the adrenaline of confrontation ebbed away. "Where do we go from here? As a family, I mean." David put his arm around my shoulders. "One step at a time, Mom. Today was about reclaiming your legal rights, your independence, your assets. The healing, that's a longer process. For all of us." Andrea packed her briefcase, her mission accomplished for the day. "The competency evaluation is scheduled for Monday. Once that's complete, and the judge confirms your capacity, you'll have full control of your affairs again. As for the house, that may take more time to resolve, but we have legal leverage to ensure a fair outcome." Back at Patricia's condo, Lisa and Patricia were waiting anxiously for news. When we told them what had happened, Jessica's initial defensiveness, her eventual capitulation, her promise to make amends, Patricia clasped her hands together in relief. "Thank goodness she saw reason," she said. "I was worried she might fight this all the way to court. The evidence was too strong," David pointed out. "And Jessica's always been practical, if nothing else." I sat heavily on the sofa, the emotional and physical toll of the day catching up with me. I just keep thinking about Emma and Tyler. What will Jessica tell them? How will they understand all this? Lisa sat beside me, her artistic hands with their colorful tattoos covering mine. "Kids are smarter and more resilient than we give them credit for," They'll process this in their own way. And they love you, Eleanor. That won't change. That evening, as we shared a quiet dinner around Patricia's table, David and Lisa, Patricia and I, a small family circle of support and love, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past weeks. From the shock of waking up to discover my house sold out from under me, through the grief and betrayal, the gathering of evidence, and finally today's confrontation, it had been a path from victimhood to empowerment, from helplessness to action. "What will you do now, Mom?" David asked as we lingered over coffee. "Once everything's resolved, legally, I mean. Will you try to get the house back? Find somewhere new? Come to Seattle for a while?" I had been pondering this question myself. The house on Maple Street had been my home for 35 years, filled with memories of Michael, of raising Jessica and David, of holiday gatherings and quiet Sunday mornings. But perhaps it was time for a new chapter, one that I chose for myself rather than clinging to the past. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "I'd like to see if we can get the house back. Not just for the memories, but because it was wrongfully taken. But whether I live there again or find somewhere new, that's a decision I'll make carefully, on my own terms, in my own time." David squeezed my hand. "Whatever you decide, we're with you, all the way." As night fell, I stood by the window of Patricia's guest room, my room for now, but not forever, looking out at the stars. The same stars that had shone over my house on Maple Street, over the garden Michael and I had tended together, over the life we had built that Jessica had tried to dismantle. I wasn't naive enough to think that one legal victory, one signed document, one reluctant apology could heal all that had been broken. There would be difficult conversations ahead, painful reckonings, slow rebuilding of trust if that was even possible. Emma and Tyler would have questions, would need to process what had happened in our family. David would return to Seattle eventually, leaving me to navigate the new reality with Jessica. But for tonight, I allowed myself to feel the simple, profound satisfaction of having stood my ground, of having refused to be diminished, controlled, erased, of having reminded Jessica, and perhaps myself, of exactly who Eleanor Mitchell was. Not a problem to be solved, not a burden to be managed, but a woman of strength, dignity, and determination who had taught generations of children and raised 2 of her own. A woman who, even at 68, with a healing heart and an uncertain future, still had the courage to fight for her right to live life on her own terms, just as Michael had always believed she would. 6 months have passed since that pivotal confrontation in Andrea Levinson's conference room. 6 months of legal proceedings, difficult conversations, tentative reconciliations, and most importantly, rebuilding my life piece by piece, not returning to what was, but creating something new on my own terms. The legal matters resolved more smoothly than we had dared hope. The competency evaluation confirmed what I had never doubted, that I was fully capable of managing my own affairs. The trust was dissolved, with all assets returned to my control. Jessica and Robert, faced with the threat of more serious legal consequences, cooperated fully in providing documentation and returning funds. The house was more complicated. The young couple who had purchased it, Amy and Jason Reynolds, had already begun renovations, tearing down walls and reimagining spaces that had witnessed 35 years of my life. When Robert approached them about selling back the property, they were understandably reluctant. They had fallen in love with the house, had begun to build their own dreams within its walls. In the end, we reached a compromise that felt right to all involved. The Reynolds would keep the house, continuing their renovations, and making it their own. In exchange, Robert and Jessica's company provided substantial financial compensation, enough for me to purchase a small cottage near the park where Michael and I used to walk every Sunday. A new home, but in a neighborhood filled with familiar memories. Moving in was both a farewell and a beginning. With David and Lisa's help, I furnished the cottage with a careful selection of items from storage: Michael's reading chair, my grandmother's rocking chair, the cedar chest, family photos, and the small treasures that carried the essence of our life together. But I also bought new pieces, chose different colors, arranged rooms in ways that would have never occurred to me in the old house. This was my space now, reflecting not just who I had been, but who I was becoming. Jessica and I have begun the slow, careful work of rebuilding our relationship. It hasn't been easy. The betrayal cut deep, the trust shattered in ways that may never be fully repaired. But she has shown genuine remorse, not just in words but in actions, respecting my boundaries, asking before offering help, recognizing my capability and autonomy in ways she never had before. Our Sunday dinners have resumed, though now they take place in my cottage rather than her home. The first few were strained, with Robert conspicuously absent and conversation limited to safe topics. But gradually, Emma and Tyler's natural exuberance broke through the tension, their delight in my new home, and their excitement about their own activities creating bridges across the awkward silences. Emma, with her perceptive nature, sought me out privately after that first dinner. "Grandma," she said, sitting beside me on the small porch swing I'd installed as a housewarming gift to myself. "Mom told us what happened, about selling your house without asking, about thinking she knew what was best for you." I nodded, curious about how Jessica had framed the situation to her children. "And what do you think about it all?" Emma was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think Mom was scared of losing you, like we lost Grandpa, but she went about it all wrong." She looked at me directly, her young face serious. "I'm glad you stood up for yourself. It's what you always taught us to do. Remember when those girls were being mean to me in 7th grade? And you said I should never let anyone make me feel small?" I smiled, touched that she remembered that conversation. "I do remember. This was kind of the same thing," Emma concluded with the simple clarity of youth. "Mom was making you feel small, and you didn't let her." Tyler has been less philosophical about the situation, but no less supportive in his own way. He's appointed himself my unofficial tech support, setting up my new smart thermostat, installing security cameras, programming my television, all with an enthusiasm that suggests he's glad to have a role, a way to connect that doesn't require navigating the emotional complexities between his mother and me. David calls more regularly now, no longer relying on Jessica's filtered updates about my condition. Lisa has sent handmade curtains for my living room windows, vibrant with colors that would have seemed too bold for my old house but feel perfectly right in this new chapter. Patricia visits often, pleased to have me nearby rather than as a temporary guest in her home. We've resumed our weekly bridge games with friends, and I've joined a new garden club that meets in the community center adjacent to the park. My small yard doesn't have room for the extensive gardens I once tended, but I've filled it with container plants and a cozy seating area where I drink my morning coffee, watching birds at the feeder I installed in memory of the one Michael built. My health has continued to improve. The cardiac rehabilitation exercises have strengthened my heart, and regular checkups with Dr. Winters confirm that I'm managing my condition well. I still take my medications faithfully and watch my diet, but I no longer feel defined by my diagnosis or limited by others' perceptions of my capabilities. Denise and I have remained in touch, though not as nurse and patient. She visits occasionally for tea, bringing news of her son's achievements in school and updates about her brother Marcus, who has been promoted to manager at Storage King. Small connections that remind me of the unexpected allies who helped me through my darkest moments. As for Jessica, our relationship will never be what it once was. The easy trust of mother and daughter has been replaced by something more cautious, more deliberate. There are moments when I catch a glimpse of genuine understanding in her eyes, a recognition of the harm she caused despite her proclaimed good intentions. And there are other moments when I sense the old patterns reasserting themselves. Her instinct to direct, to manage, to control, barely held in check. But we are finding a new way forward, step by step. Last week, she asked if I would help Emma prepare for college interviews, acknowledging that my years of experience with young people gave me insights she lacked. A small gesture, but significant in its recognition of my continuing value, my ongoing contribution to our family's life. This evening, as autumn paints the trees in the park with shades of gold and crimson, I sit on my porch with Michael's journal open in my lap. I've been reading through his entries chronologically, finding comfort in his words, in his perspective on our shared life. Today, I reached an entry from 25 years ago, when Jessica was in college and David still in high school. Watched Ellie in the garden today, patiently training new rose canes along the trellis I built last summer. She has such quiet persistence, such gentle determination. The roses had other ideas about which direction to grow, but she carefully, respectfully, guided them toward the support they needed without breaking a single stem. That's always been her way, with her students, with our children, with me, guiding without forcing. supporting without controlling. It's a kind of strength most people never recognize until they need it themselves. Michael saw me more clearly than I sometimes saw myself. That quiet strength he described has carried me through the past 6 months, through the confrontation with Jessica, through the creation of this new life. It will carry me forward, through whatever challenges lie ahead. Tomorrow, Emma is coming over to work on her college essays. Tyler has a baseball game in the afternoon that I'll attend with Patricia. Jessica and Robert have invited me to dinner at a new restaurant in town, a tentative step toward including Robert in our healing process. Life continues, with its complicated mix of joy and sorrow, connection and separation, endings and beginnings. The sun is setting now, casting long shadows across my small yard with its container gardens and comfortable chairs. Not the sprawling space I once tended on Maple Street, but mine nonetheless, chosen by me, arranged by me, reflecting who I am now, not just Eleanor Mitchell, wife of Michael and mother of Jessica and David, but Eleanor in her own right, a woman who refused to be erased, who fought for her dignity and independence, who reminded her daughter, and perhaps herself, of an essential truth. We do not become less worthy of respect, less deserving of autonomy, less entitled to self-determination as we age. If anything, the wisdom of our years, the lives we have built, the challenges we have overcome should earn us greater respect, not less. The right to make our own choices, even imperfect ones, is not diminished by gray hair or health challenges, or the well-meaning concerns of those who claim to know better. As darkness falls, I close Michael's journal and rise from my porch swing. Inside my cottage, lights glow warmly in windows that are now familiar, though they've been mine for only a few months. This is home now, not because of the structure itself or its location, but because within these walls, I am free. Free to live according to my own choices, free to grow old on my own terms, free to be fully and completely myself. And in that freedom, I have found not just recovery from betrayal, but a deeper understanding of my own resilience. Jessica took my house, but she could not take my strength. In trying to diminish me, she only revealed how much more I was than she had recognized. That is the lesson I will carry forward. That is the legacy I will leave to Emma and Tyler, to the generations that follow. Not just the story of a house sold without permission, but the story of a woman who, at 68, discovered she was stronger than anyone, including herself, had ever realized.